Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will discuss a deeply tragic case that is sure to leave a lasting impression. The case of Lynette Wilshank. The case rate of women's murder in South Africa is 5 times higher than the global average, according to Statistics South Africa 2018. In recent years, increasing academic attention has focused on media reports that such cases are predominantly violent in nature in terms of physical abuse. Let's focus on Lynette Wilshank, a 32-year-old woman from a small town in South Africa. After completing her education, she moved to the capital city. Lynette had a passion for nature, often enjoying walks and visits to local parks. She was a kind and friendly person who loved to draw. She had a small circle of friends. They recognized her as a talented, educated, and open individual. For the 5 years leading up to the tragedy, Lynette lived in a 10th-floor apartment in a residential complex in the Belleville suburb of Cape Town. Suddenly, on August 21, 2019, she failed to show up for work at an engineering firm, which raised immediate concern among her management and colleagues. They attempted to contact her through phone calls and social media, but Lynette did not respond to any of their efforts. This was unusual behavior for her, as she had been a dedicated employee for a long time after that event. Her colleagues noted that Lynette had recently been less active on social media and instant messengers, making her silence even more suspicious, despite some concerns. No one checked on Lynette, assuming she was dealing with an urgent matter or was unwell. Everyone was just waiting for updates from her. However, Lynette will never return to work. On August 22, her younger sister, Crystal, attempted to call Lynette for the second consecutive day, but received no answer. Worried, Crystal went to Lynette's apartment building to investigate. As she approached the front door, she heard strange noises and rustling coming from inside. Thinking Lynette might be home, Crystal rang the doorbell. A man she didn't recognize answered the door. He wearing rubber gloves and surrounded by a strong smell of cleaning products. Confused, Crystal asked about the stranger's presence. He didn't introduce himself, but calmly explained that Lynette had hired him to do some cleaning, and he had already been paid. He claimed he needed to leave, but would come back later. Crystal found this explanation suspicious, especially because of the dark stains on the man's jumpsuit and the overall condition of the apartment. As Crystal quickly looked around the room, she spotted suspicious brown marks on the walls and floor that looked like dried blood, similar to the stains on the stranger's suit. The man tried to mislead her by claiming that Lynette had been arrested for banned substance possession, which was hard to believe since Lynette had never used them. When the man attempted to leave, Crystal was determined to stop him. She stood in the doorway, making noise and calling for the police. Neighbors drawn by her shouts. They went out and were also shocked at what was about to happen when the police arrived. They immediately entered the apartment. The marks on the walls and floor were indeed bloody. Much of the kitchen and hallway had been cleaned, and a strong smell of cleaning products filled the air. Large patches of dried body fluids were visible on the floors in every room, suggesting a crime had occurred. This suspicion was confirmed when the detectives checked the bathroom and found body parts. With some already packed into large garbage bags, the man cleaned the apartment was identified as Kyle Reuters, a neighbor from the floor below. He was quickly detained, and the clothes he wore while cleaning were taken as evidence. Kyle was handcuffed and taken to jail. The detectives thought they had found the killer in the act, but they still needed to confirm his connection to the crime and gather more evidence against him. The police spoke with Crystal, who confirmed that she had not been able to reach Lynette since August 21. She mentioned that she had gone to check on her sister, but instead was greeted by a stranger who opened the door for her. Kyle was born in Johannesburg, but his biological parents abandoned him shortly after birth. They struggled with banned substance addiction and did not care for their child's well-being. When it became clear that living with them was unsafe for the infant, he was placed in the care of his grandmother. However, she was unable to fully take care of him, so he was then entrusted to his aunt. Teresa. She raised him as her own son and moved him to Cape Town, where they lived on the 9th floor of a residential complex that Lynette would later also move into. Kyle lived with his aunt for over 10 years. Teresa had a successful career in the Bar Association, specializing in criminal law, and worked hard to provide for and raise her nephew. Kyle attended Weinberg High School for Boys, a well-known and prestigious school, recognized as one of the best in the area during his time there. He faced bullying from his classmates, which only stopped when he began playing sports and learned to defend himself. Kyle had a hard time finding a girlfriend and faced challenges in his relationships, but his struggles were not due to his looks. He participated in sports and was a member of the hockey team, and he was actually quite attractive. However, girls tended to avoid him because of his unusual personality. In high school, he struggled academically, but his success in sports helped him gain admission to university in 2016. When he was 21, his friends described him as cheerful and goal-oriented, always working hard to achieve his objectives. From November 1, 2018 to the end of June 2019, Kyle worked at a Christian bookstore in a shopping center. His colleagues found him to be friendly and sociable, always willing to help others, and knowledgeable about his work. The police quickly pieced together the events that led to a tragedy. As they questioned possible witnesses, they learned that around 5 p.m. on August 20, a loud scream came from Lynette's apartment, which sounded like someone was calling for help. Unfortunately, no one responded to the cry. Neighbors noticed that a few weeks before discovered the body. Kyle began to act strangely. He was frequently seen lingering on the landing, where he could watch his neighbor's front door for extended periods. He avoided interactions with other residents of the apartment complex, and when asked what he was doing, he gave vague answers and quickly left. At that time, no one suspected his malicious intentions, but it became apparent that he had been stalking a potential victim. Investigations showed that Kyle was closely monitoring Lynette, studying her work schedule and daily routine, and taking note of when she woke up, went to bed, and visited the store. On August 20, Kyle decided to carry out his violent plan. He waited for Lynette to return home from the grocery store around 5 p.m. She was busy with heavy bags and didn't immediately lock her door after entering. Knowing this, Kyle seized the opportunity and entered her apartment without her noticing. Once Lynette reached the kitchen and placed her groceries on the table, she turned around to find an intruder standing behind her. Kyle then suddenly attacked her. Lynette wrestled to fight back. Surprising Kyle with her strength, however, he grabbed one of her kitchen knives and began to attack her. Realizing her life was in danger, Lynette continued to resist and cried out for help. Unfortunately, after a while, Kyle delivered several fatal blows. Silencing her cries, the neighbors paid little attention to her screams. Other residents of the building confirmed that, alongside her scream, they also heard odd thuds coming from her apartment that day. These sounds were akin to dull blows from a hammer, but in reality, they were the noises of him moving and dismembering her body. Kyle dragged Lynette into the bathroom and began cutting her. Neighbors heard these sounds, but ignored them. Believing they were just home repairs, forensic experts later found numerous defensive wounds on her hands. He inflicted multiple stab wounds to her neck, causing her to lose consciousness and eventually bleed to death. Kyle's plan was not finished. He knew he had to dispose of the body and conceal the crime. The killer decided the best method was to dispose of the parts in various locations around the city. Evidence supporting this plan was discovered in Lynette's apartment, in the bathroom. Investigators found many black bags and a handsaw. They also located a knife that was confirmed to be the murder weapon. Teresa was away from home during this time, so Kyle had planned the event. This allowed him to calmly handle the body on the day of the murder. He separated the victim's head, arms, and legs, and cut the torso into smaller pieces to make it easier to transport from the apartment complex. In total, he used 9 bags for the remains. he stored some of the remains in a refrigerator found in Lynette's room and moved other parts to his apartment on the 9th floor over several trips after this exhausting task. He went to bed around 10 p.m. that same night. In the morning, Kyle visited the nearest hardware store. There, he purchased gloves, cleaning supplies, and a jumpsuit. Afterward, returned to the apartment of Lynette. His first action was to dispose of Lynette's head. He placed the head in a small backpack and left the apartment to take a short walk in the nearby park. Discarded this backpack into the bushes, however. Kyle was captured on numerous surveillance cameras, making him easy to track. The backpack was found only about 400 meters away from the apartment. To clean up, Kyle used towels to wipe the body fluids and threw them into a trash can at the apartment complex, where they were quickly discovered. During this time, neighbors noticed him carrying a cooler bag while he was outside. The killer returned by a different route, apparently to confuse the tracks, but his movements were too obvious. The worst mistake he made was opening the door to Crystal. It's hard to understand why he chose to confront her while wearing a body fluid-stained cleaning suit, especially given that her sister was missing when the police arrived at the scene. They were already familiar with this apartment building just 2 months before the murder. A 65-year-old man named Anthony Mary was found dead there. During the investigation, detectives discovered that the attacker had entered through a back exit meant for fire evacuations. Anthony had been tied to a chair, but no suspects were identified in that case. Suspicion began to grow that Anthony's death was part of a series of violent events, including Lynette's murder. This news deeply shocked the residents of the apartment building, especially Aunt Teresa. She initially couldn't believe her nephew could be involved in such acts. However, after examining the case details, she came to the troubling realization that Kyle was indeed the perpetrator. Teresa became increasingly worried about the media attention. Journalists frequented her home, seeking information about the incident. Despite their persistence, she declined to comment and even threatened to sue several television stations that had taken her photograph. She regarded this behavior as a threat, requested restrictions on the use of her photo and images of Kyle. However, this was not achieved, as the police were required to notify local residents about these crimes, including by providing photographs. When Kyle arrived at the trial, the crowd attacked with insults and threats. Despite this, he remained calm, showing no emotions on his face. During the hearing, the investigators was confirmed that he had no prior convictions or legal issues. The judge permitted photographs to be taken of him, as he was clearly implicated in the murder. After this, the trial was postponed due to the fact that not all the examinations were ready, because Lynette's family struggled with the bitterness of loss and could not attend the trial for some time. Meanwhile, the authorities, following the lawyer's instructions, seriously considered allowing bail so Kyle could be placed under house arrest until the trial began. This sparked significant outrage, as the crime was seen as an extreme act of cruelty. Driven by a desire to kill and unprovoked aggression, Kyle clearly posed a danger to society. On September 7, a funeral was held to honor Lynette. Many friends, family members, and colleagues who had close relationships with her attended the ceremony. At this time, investigators were busy gathering evidence, including a significant amount of DNA found at the crime scene. However, the onset of the 2020 pandemic caused extensive delays and complications within the judicial system. During this time, Kyle's legal representation changed, and he was subjected to a psychiatric evaluation. Psychiatrists who interacted with him determined that, despite some mental health issues, he was fully capable of standing trial. They noted his manipulative behavior, frequent lies, and inconsistent statements. Overall, he is regarded as a highly dangerous individual. Despite this assessment, Kyle's new defense attorney requested a second psychiatric evaluation, arguing that the initial examination was flawed and claiming that Kyle was insane and required treatment rather than imprisonment. Kyle was supposed to be placed in a hospital, but due to issues with lockdowns and a high number of patients, the process was delayed for 12 months. Once the lockdown was lifted, things progressed more quickly, however. The examination didn't begin until 3 months later. Kyle was provided with a ward, and a 30-day observation began. Unfortunately, this observation extended to 2 months. It wasn't until February 2021 that Kyle was deemed sane and ready to face a jury, although 2 psychiatric reports had confirmed his sanity. The defense lawyer requested an examination by an independent expert. The defense aimed to highlight Kyle's psychological issues that contributed to his crime. The court approved this request, causing further delays. While waiting for the hearing, Kyle was moved to another prison, where he was also found to be sane. The prosecution's witness list included nearly 60 people, primarily neighbors who observed Kyle following the victim. The investigators was confirmed that he not only murdered a defenseless woman, but also faced charges for desecrating her body by dismembering it. Meanwhile, there was no evidence to support claims of abuse. During a search of Kyle's room, authorities found about 10 South African rand, which he had attempted to use to cover up the massacre. He also misused Lynette's personal belongings, which constituted theft. The trial commenced on May 9, 2023. Initially, Kyle persistently denied his guilt, despite the overwhelming evidence against him. The prosecution offered a plea deal. They proposed that he plead guilty to first-degree murder, desecration of a body, and attempts to obstruct justice. In return, he would be exempt from charges related to theft and the creation and possession of counterfeit money. Kyle accepted the deal. In the plea agreement, Kyle described in detail the massacre of Lynette's murder. According to him, he did not know Lynette and had only crossed paths with her a few times, but this was enough for him to target her and choose her as his first victim. He could not explain why he was guided at that moment. He simply had a thirst for violence and found a convenient victim living nearby. Kyle had been planning this attack for a long time. Therefore, he watched Lynette, tracked her down, and analyzed her behavior. Kyle wanted to act as effectively as possible, so he familiarized himself in detail with a number of cases in which killers had successfully hidden from the police for a long time. He tried to understand and take into account their experiences to avoid mistakes in disposing of bodies. However, it did not help him. He didn't even take into account how many cameras recorded almost every action of his. Then Kyle claimed that the murder was not an act of cruelty, according to him. In 2019, he experienced serious difficulties with substance addiction. He owed his dealer a large sum of money, about 30 South African rand, so he was looking for a way to solve his financial problems. Specifically, he printed counterfeit banknotes, but realized that he would have even more problems when the deception was revealed. So, Kyle decided to kill someone and sell her expensive property to cover his debt. The prosecution insisted that it was a carefully planned, cold-blooded murder. Nevertheless, the defendant maintained that his main goal was the keys to the car Lynette owned, which he was going to sell. He regretted what happened, calling it a misunderstanding, referring to the fact that the robbery did not go according to plan. Based on these facts, the court decided that Kyle could be considered a particularly dangerous criminal. The reason is that for Kyle to be recognized as a particularly dangerous criminal, he must undergo a second psychiatric examination. With 30 days of monitoring, there were rumors that during his imprisonment awaiting trial, Kyle became a member of one of the dangerous prison gangs called 28, and he even had a corresponding tattoo on the inside of his wrist. However, he himself denied his initiation into the group. He claimed that at the time of the attack, he was under the influence of banned substance, which gave him courage and strength. According to him, he became addicted to substances because his parents were addicts. By November 2023, a report from a psychiatrist was ready. Accordingly, which Kyle Reuters was designated an especially dangerous criminal according to experts. He lied about remorse for the murder. In reality, he did not regret what he had done. He even addressed the family of Lynette with an apology. But everyone thought that Kyle was doing this only to soften the sentence. After 4 years and 3 months since the brutal massacre, Kyle Reuters finally received a life sentence for the murders. Another 15 years were added to the term for desecration of the body and 5 for attempting to falsify evidence. The prosecution insisted that the case materials and Kyle's dossier include photographs from the scene of the massacre. The prosecutor's office believed that this would allow all participants in the process to understand what kind of monster was really in front of them if he were to become eligible for parole. This evidence would likely save the commission from making a rash decision. In fact, there was every reason to believe that Kyle was very dangerous during the search of his apartment. Many books on criminal law and forensic examination were found. Of course, they could have belonged to Teresa, who worked as a criminal lawyer. Nevertheless, more disturbing evidence was found directly in Kyle's room, namely, several notebooks with his handwriting in them. He fantasized about abuses and numerous murders. The most frightening notebook contained the names of 19 women on its pages. He called himself a master of manipulation. Closely tracking all the movements and habits of his future victims, Kyle meticulously followed each item on his list, documenting the schedule, work hours, and even filming everything on video. It appeared he planned that all the women noted in Kyle's notebook were destined for the same fate as Lynette, including one woman who had previously rejected his advances, which led Kyle to hold a grudge against her. Fortunately, law enforcement apprehended him before he could act on his plans. The officers had no doubt about his intentions, as Kyle not only took detailed notes but also outlined specific methods he intended to use against his victims on his laptop. Investigators discovered over a terabyte of disturbing content. Between April and August 2019, he visited numerous websites detailing chemicals that could induce unconsciousness or death. The forensic evidence also included accounts of notorious serial killings from criminal history. It was clear that Kyle was plotting a series of crimes and was meticulously preparing to evade capture. He showed particular interest in the actions of infamous serial killers like Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Edmund Kemper, but he was especially fascinated by the Zodiac Killer, who had never been caught. On April 29, 2019, Kyle referred to himself as a charming psychopath and a smart serial killer. Fortunately, he was mistaken and did not have the opportunity to harm any other women. There is no evidence linking him to the murder of another resident, Anthony Morey. Kyle often fantasized about murdering women in his notebooks, which makes it unlikely that he intended to kill a man. However, cannot completely rule out the possibility, and Kyle remains the primary suspect in this case. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Riley Whitelaw. Riley Whitelaw was born on January 20th, 2005 in Colorado Springs, El Paso County, USA, the only child of Courtney, a single mother. From an early age, Riley demonstrated kindness, empathy, and respect for others. Her bright smile brought warmth and joy to everyone around her. Riley loves to draw and wants to learn to play the guitar. After attending the Air Force Academy, she proved herself to be an excellent student. Among her classmates, she was known for her calm demeanor, confidence, and leadership skills. When Riley was a teenager, her mother met a man named Chris Johnson. Their relationship quickly developed into love, leading to the decision to marry. Riley, who always wanted the best for her mother, did her best to adapt to the changes Chris brought to their home. Chris, who never had the opportunity to be a father, welcomed Riley with open arms and treated her like his own daughter, expressing that he felt lucky to be a part of her life. In 2021, Riley is 16 years old. She is more mature, and gets a part-time job at a branch of an American company that operates the second-largest pharmacy chain in the country. This pharmacy not only sells medicines and healthcare products but also provides photography services. Riley only works 2 days a week because she still has to continue her studies. Despite her busy schedule, she feels happy and enthusiastically accepts the challenge. At first, everything goes smoothly. Riley enjoys her job and always completes her tasks. She quickly gains the appreciation of customers and builds good relationships with her colleagues. Among Riley's co-workers is a man named Joshua Johnson. Not much is known about his background, but he is in his 30s and has just been released from prison. The appearance of Riley, a young girl at the pharmacy, changes his life. Joshua, who is withdrawn and hot-tempered, is Riley's complete opposite. Despite their differences, Joshua develops feelings for her. Everyone around him notices this and realizes his unusual intentions, considering Riley's age. However, he insists that he will wait until she is an adult before asking her out. Joshua cannot hide his feelings for Riley for long and begins to show his attention to her, trying to win her over. He eventually openly confesses his love for her. However, Riley does not have feelings for him. After being rejected, Joshua becomes hurt and begins to act out, trying to hurt Riley whenever possible. During a class where he is supposed to teach her and another coworker about how to work in a photo lab, he completely ignores her. This behavior frustrates Riley, as it negatively affects the quality of her work. Joshua refuses to answer her questions or offer any help. Initially, Riley was upset and often reflected on Joshua's behavior toward her, wondering what she had done to deserve such negative treatment. However, over time, Joshua crossed the line. First, he touched her inappropriately. And then he slapped her. Riley felt both angry and offended by these actions. She realized that Joshua was invading her and her personal space. Riley chose to speak up about the incident. Gathering her courage, she informed the pharmacy manager, Justin Sunni, about what had happened. Justin helped to remind Joshua. Joshua remained silent and pretended to understand. Nothing else was done to protect Riley. Not wanting to worry her mother, Riley decides to keep the meeting between her, Joshua, and her manager Justin a secret. However, she still shared with Courtney the impact Joshua's behavior had had on her. For a while, they barely worked together, and Riley tried to forget about the incident. However, when she decided to increase her hours, she found herself scheduled to work the same shift as Joshua. In early 2020, she met Jacob Lee, who was 2 years older than her. As their relationship developed, they decided to date. Suddenly, Jacob decided to work part-time at the pharmacy, just like Riley. In early spring 2022, Jacob started working, allowing them to spend more time together. Like Riley, Jacob quickly became friends with all the employees, except Joshua. Although there were no major conflicts between them, Joshua always seemed uncomfortable whenever they had to work together. Jacob wasn't the only one who noticed. The second manager, Crystal Ismail, also noticed that Joshua was jealous of Jacob because he was Riley's boyfriend. Joshua saw Jacob as his rival. Joshua still didn't give up on his love and continued to try to get closer to Riley. Feeling frustrated by his harassment, Riley finally asked for a change in her working hours. After a while, Riley needed more money and wanted to work overtime. Her boss informed her that she would have to work the same shift as Joshua because she had no other choice. Riley shared her concerns with Jacob. Riley shares her concerns with Jacob, but he doesn't take her words seriously and doesn't realize the severity of the situation. This disappoints Riley. On June 11, 2022, Riley was at the pharmacy where Crystal was in charge of management, and everything was going smoothly. Although Joshua was on the same shift as Riley, he took advantage of his co-worker's distraction to enter the break room. First, he placed a busy sign on the bathroom door, then blocked the view of one of the surveillance cameras with containers, and finally taped the window. The exact details of what happened next remain unclear, but when it was time for Riley's break, she entered the break room where Joshua was hiding, ready to put her plan into action. At approximately 5:44 p.m., surveillance camera footage captured a customer named Alicia Shanky in the store when she heard a woman scream. Seconds later, she heard the door close, but Alicia ignored it. She made her purchase and left the store. Meanwhile, in the break room, Joshua attacked Riley with a knife, and the attack was both quick and brutal, and Riley died instantly. Crystal, the store manager, becomes concerned when Riley does not return to work after her break and becomes even more suspicious when she notices that Joshua is also missing. She quickly goes outside the door where the trash can is. As she approaches, she sees someone's bare feet and, feeling scared, she rushes back to the pharmacy, locking the front desk door to prevent anyone from entering. This allows Joshua to dispose of Riley's blood-stained items in the trash without being seen. He then returns home. A few minutes later, Crystal mustered up the courage and went outside again, but the person was gone. Unable to find Riley, she decided to contact the manager, Justin. She also called Jacob, but he had no information on Riley's location. Justin then went to the pharmacy to investigate the situation. It was a little after 6 p.m. when he arrived. When he arrived, he quickly began reviewing the surveillance camera footage and saw Riley walking towards the break room. In an earlier recording, he noticed Joshua stacking boxes and containers to block the camera's view. Justin walked into the break room, quickly opened the door, and turned on the lights. He was horrified to see blood everywhere. And in the corner of the room, he found Riley's body. Shocked, Justin called the police at 6:05 p.m. 10 minutes later. Officers arrived at the pharmacy, where they discovered Riley's body. She was found on the floor with her badge and headphones nearby. In addition to the severe neck injury, she had suffered several other injuries. Alicia, a customer at the pharmacy during the day, passed by the scene that evening and noticed police and patrol cars. She stopped to report the screams she had heard earlier. Police officers Steve Alonso and Mike Lee began their investigation. Meanwhile, someone informed Riley's mother, Courtney, of the tragic news. The distraught mother rushed to the pharmacy and was stunned when she arrived at the crime scene. When asked by police if she knew anyone who Riley's enemies were or who might have committed such an act, Courtney did not remember Joshua. She believed her daughter was the victim of a robbery and did not know that her daughter was actually murdered by a coworker. Police collected evidence at the crime scene and sent the body for forensic examination. The Riley had 42 stab wounds, and there were similar injuries on her hands, suggesting she attempted to defend herself. Experts concluded that she died from a lack of oxygen. Joshua fled the city early in the morning but was stopped by a patrol officer as he headed toward the New Mexico border. The officer was unaware of his actions and arrested him based solely on his appearance, as his face was covered in cuts, scrapes, and bruises. When asked about his injuries, Joshua claimed that he had been attacked in a store in Colorado Springs. However, when the patrol officer contacted Colorado Springs police, they discovered that Joshua was actually the suspect in Riley's murder and not the victim. Afterwards, he was arrested and brought back to the city. Currently, the pharmacy's representatives are not making any statements to the media. Police have denied permission to share information that might disrupt the ongoing investigation. The pharmacy has closed its doors and is no longer serving customers. Nearby, the community has set up a makeshift memorial for Riley, adorning it with numerous flowers, letters, and gifts from those who are grieving. Joshua admitted during his initial police interview that he was in love with Riley. He admitted to being in the break room with her but claimed that the incident was accidental. This confession led police to identify him as the person who had been near Crystal at the dumpster. Despite the evidence against him, Joshua maintained his innocence and denied obstructing the view of the security camera. Police later discovered his DNA on the murder weapon. After obtaining a court warrant to search his home, they found a black hoodie with blood and traces of DNA belonging to Riley. Joshua was charged with first-degree murder and held without bail in El Paso County, with his trial scheduled for June 2022. Riley's funeral was held on June 23, 2022. Her mother received many letters of support from classmates, pharmacy customers, and others. On November 15, 2022, Joshua pleaded not guilty to all charges at his preliminary hearing. The trial was originally scheduled to begin on March 6, 2023, but the defense requested additional time to prepare and requested that Joshua undergo a mental health evaluation to determine whether he was competent to stand trial. As a result, the trial was postponed. The evaluation later determined that Joshua was sane. He remains in custody at the El Paso County Jail, with bail set at $10 million. In late September 2023, after all attempts to postpone the trial, Joshua finally appeared in court and faced Riley's relatives. On the first day of the trial, the prosecutor explained to the jury that Joshua and Riley both worked at a pharmacy and detailed the events that took place there. The defense maintained that Joshua happened to be at the crime scene. They presented that Joshua entered the break room and found Riley lying on the floor. At that point, he was attacked by an unknown assailant, causing him to flee for safety, despite feeling guilty for leaving Riley behind. However, witness testimonies have made it clear that Joshua's account is incorrect. One of the longest testimonies came from Justin, who discovered the body and was the pharmacy manager that first contacted the police. The prosecutor's office also called Riley's mother, Courtney, to testify. She shared insights about her daughter, describing her as someone who loved to help others. Courtney mentioned that Riley had expressed concerns about Joshua's behavior on several occasions. She recalled one incident when Riley was working with Joshua in the photo services area, where he touched her inappropriately. This led Riley to speak with her supervisors, resulting in her being allowed to change her work schedule. In October 2023, after arguments from both the prosecution and defense had concluded, after an hour of deliberations, the jury reached a verdict. Joshua Johnson was convicted of first-degree murder. The judge expressed gratitude to everyone who contributed to achieving justice, especially the Colorado Springs police. After the trial, some expressed their anger toward Joshua, while others chose to remember Riley as a kind, young girl who tragically lost her life because of his actions. On the podium in the auditorium, there were 3 items: an empty vase, a bag containing 42 purple stones, and a small bouquet of sunflowers. Riley's loved ones had brought these items on purpose. The stones represented the number of wounds Riley had suffered. Each person giving a speech took a handful of stones and put them in a vase. The 9th and final speaker was her mother, Courtney. She wore a jacket with the insignia of the National Guard, where her daughter served. Despite her deep grief, Courtney spoke very strongly that she would not let Joshua, whom she called a monster, take away her love for her late daughter. People admired her for this, considering it her greatest strength. She emphasized that her daughter was never afraid to express her opinion when things were not going well and always confidently led others. At the end of her speech, Courtney placed the sunflowers in a vase containing 42 purple stones before returning to her seat. At the end of the hearing, Joshua Johnson was sentenced to life in prison. Courtney established a memorial fund in Riley's name, which provides scholarships to high school graduates. In the future, Courtney plans to organize charity events that she believes Riley would have enjoyed, including art nights, exhibitions, and running. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sharon Pryor. Sharon Pryor was born on February 9, 1959, in Montreal, Canada. Her mother, Yvonne Pryor, is from the UK, and her mother's family immigrated to Canada when she was very young. Her mother lived her entire life in Canada, where she met her future husband, George, a serviceman. The couple fell in love, got married, and later welcomed their daughter Sharon. Just before Sharon's second birthday, her mother gave birth to twin girls, Doreen Va Marine, in 1962. Then she had another brother, who was the youngest. In 1965, George was stationed elsewhere in a different location, leading to the couple's decision to divorce. While George continued his military career and moved frequently, Yvonne settled in an apartment in Lang, Canada, provided through a program for military families. This quiet and cozy place seemed perfect for raising her children. Yvonne, Sharon's mother, thought she had found a safe home for her family. But she was unaware that danger could lurk even in such peaceful neighborhoods. From a young age, Sharon is famous for being a very gentle person, beautiful, and caring. She was responsible, sincere, and kind, which drove her to help those in need. Consequently, she often rescued homeless animals, especially those that were sick or injured. This compassion inspired her dream of becoming a veterinarian in the future. Later on, Sharon joined a school club and began playing hockey. She was also very creative, dedicating her free time to art clubs and needlework classes. With her many talents, Sharon appeared to have a bright future ahead. Yvonne was thrilled to see her daughter blossoming into such a wonderful person. As Sharon's assistant, Yvonne was naturally cautious and tried to protect her from negative influences and trouble. Sadly, this caution could not shield Sharon from meeting a cruel man who came into her life. At 16, Sharon is a normal girl facing typical teenage problems. She loved the music of the time and had new hobbies that her parents didn't always support. During this time, she met a young man named John, who had admired her since the 4th grade. Eventually, they started dating in the presence of their friends and were seen as a close-knit and loving couple. Sharon's parents, recognizing their affection for each other, supported their relationship. According to Sharon's mother, they had a harmonious relationship with no conflicts, and Sharon was surrounded by good people. Unfortunately, they were unable to shield her from trouble. On March 29, 1975, everything was going on as usual. Sharon woke up and had breakfast. Her mother was out running errands, having gone to the store the day before Easter to buy food and gifts for her children. When her mother returned home with the shopping, Sharon, the eldest daughter, helped her unpack. This day was meant to be special for the family. Additionally, her mother's boyfriend and his son, Stephen, along with some friends, were planning to visit. Sharon spent most of the day painting Easter eggs and preparing for the holiday. Stephen arrived early and played with her younger brother. Afterward, Sharon got ready to go with Stephen to a sports and crafts association, where they were members. Sharon will go there to get a coat called Garl. This named after the brother of the organization's founder, who died of leukemia. This jacket represented membership in the association, but it wasn't given to everyone. The children had to earn it, for instance, by selling lottery tickets. Sharon was determined to get jacket and had successfully sold enough tickets. Excited, she went to the association to receive her personalized jacket. However, she was disappointed to find that they did not have her size available. As a result, Sharon had to return home empty-handed with Stephen, planning to come back for her jacket another day. Despite her disappointment, Sharon maintained the festive spirit. She joined her mother and boyfriend to help with the final preparations for the gathering. Once the guests arrived, Sharon and her mother hid Easter eggs for the children to find later. Sharon then asked to go to the local pizzeria, Marina, which was popular among teenagers. It was close to home, and her mother often allowed her to go there with friends. This time was no different. After receiving permission, Sharon went to her room to get ready. While Sharon was about to leave, the girl next door came to visit. Everyone chatted while Sharon got ready. She borrowed one of her mother's sweaters and put on her favorite suede jacket. Around 7 p.m., Sharon and her neighbor left the house, but Sharon went to the pizza shop alone because her neighbor changed her mind and didn't want to go anymore. They said their goodbyes. The girl next door went home, while Sharon headed to meet her friends at the pizzeria. A group of teenagers was already there waiting for Sharon, but she didn't arrive on time. The others assumed she was just late because she was with her boyfriend John, so they didn't worry and continued their evening at the pizzeria. At that time, several employees from the company were watching a hockey match at home. After the game ended, they headed to the pizzeria. Among them was John, Sharon's boyfriend, who was there without her and had no idea where she was. Like the others, he expected Sharon to be at the pizzeria by the time they arrived, and her absence worried everyone since she was usually very punctual. Meanwhile, Sharon's mother, Yvonne, was at home putting the younger children to bed and watching TV. She decided to wait a bit longer, thinking that Sharon might have lost track of time while spending time with a friend, and will return home later. She stayed in the living room, watching TV, so she wouldn't miss her daughter's return, but she still hadn't come home. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, Yvonne was overwhelmed with fear because there was still no news about her daughter, Sharon. It was too late to call Sharon's friends, so she had to wait until morning, look out the window occasionally. As dawn approached, Yvonne started calling Sharon's friends to find out where she was. Unfortunately, neither her friends nor John knew her whereabouts. She was deeply troubled to learn that Sharon had never been to the pizza shop that evening. The girl next door confirmed that they had said goodbye to Sharon on the street, and she hasn't seen Sharon since. When Yvonne spoke to Mary, Sharon's best friend, she became even more anxious. Mary said her that after 7 p.m. near the pizzeria, a 20-year-old girl named Cheryl Roy was attacked by a stranger with a knife. Fortunately, other passers-by heard Cheryl's screams, which scared the attacker away. Witnesses reported that the man fled in the direction Sharon would have taken to the pizzeria. They described him as tall, dark-haired, blue-eyed, and mustached. He spoke calmly and wore a ski jacket, blue jeans, and pointed-toe shoes. After hearing this, Yvonne panicked, realizing that the time and location of the attack matched with the route Sharon usually takes. She came to report to the police, but they have yet to come to any conclusions. The police were in no rush to charge anyone in the attack. Instead, they decided to immediately launch a search. Hundreds of people learned about the incident and came out to help search for Sharon, a 16-year-old schoolgirl. They received her photo and description to make the search easier. Her mother, Yvonne, appeared on television to inform everyone about her daughter's disappearance and urged anyone with useful information to contact the police. Unfortunately, despite their efforts, there were no new leads. Days went by without any updates on Sharon's whereabouts, but her mother continued to hope for her daughter's safe return. However, the police had already searched the area, and the chances of finding Sharon alive were dwindling. Sharon had no reason to run away from home. She had a good relationship with her parents and was dating a nice guy at school. Their relationship is built on love and understanding, and he didn't seem like someone who would harm her. Sharon also stayed away from troublemakers, so when she disappeared, the police had no leads or suspects. Attempts to locate a man with a knife seen nearby were unsuccessful. The investigation has not made any new progress in a long time, and Sharon's mother was devastated, but she still hoped for her daughter's safe return. On April 1st, around 6 a.m., Sharon's mother, Yvonne, noticed something unusual through the window. A familiar young man was leaving Sharon's house, crossing the street to retrieve a newspaper left on her doorstep. Sensing something was off, she called out to him, trying to understand why he was up so early and taking newspapers from house to house. He didn't respond and instead quickened his pace to leave. She rushed outside and caught up with him. He tried to keep the newspaper, but she managed to grab it from him. He shouted for her not to look, but she did anyway. On the main page, she was confronted with a heartbreaking photo of a girl's body found in the snow. This incident occurred in the suburbs, just a few minutes' drive from their home. She was not only shocked by the news but also because the police did not inform her, which they should have done. She learned about it later than many neighbors who had seen the latest news in the paper. She convinced herself that it wasn't Sharon but rather another girl who resembled her daughter. After gathering her thoughts, Yvonne called the police to dispute the newspaper's frightening headline. The detectives informed her that they had not yet confirmed if the body belonged to Sharon, which intensified her fear. Feeling overwhelmed, she asked for Sharon's father, George, to come to the area for her since she was in shock. The photograph of the victim bore a striking resemblance to her missing daughter, Sharon, and she was dressed exactly as Sharon's mother had described. When Sharon's father got there, he recognized his daughter, leaving no doubt that the 16-year-old schoolgirl was deceased. A local resident, Jacques, who had also read about the girl's disappearance in the newspaper, discovered the body. Upon recognizing the victim looked like Sharon, he immediately reported the grim discovery. Jacques usually made sure that all his doors were locked, but on Tuesday, he discovered that one lock was open and the door was unlocked. He thought it was strange that there were no signs of a break-in, as if someone had a key. The truth was, he was the only person with full access to the house. When he went outside to the driveway, he was shocked to find a woman's body lying there, naked from the waist down. Additionally, nothing had been taken from his home. Jacques was perplexed about why the body was found in that location. Patrol officers soon arrived, and a murder investigation began. They quickly noted that it was a brutal crime. Sharon had multiple signs of abuse, including bruises and hematomas. She was only wearing a suede jacket and a blue sweater, with her jeans located a few meters away and her underwear caught on a tree. Her mouth was tightly taped, with the tape tangled in her hair. She was gripping the tape in her hand, suggesting she had fought to remove it. There were clear indications that Sharon had attempted to rise, implying she was left alive during the horrific ordeal. Investigators found additional evidence about 15 meters from the body, including tire tracks leading from that spot to where the body lay, along with a trail of blood droplets. No signs of dragging were present. The investigators quickly concluded that multiple individuals may have been involved in this violent act. Sharon's socks and shoes showed no dirt, indicating she did not crawl on the ground by herself. Instead, she was carried out of the car and abandoned in the cold. Near her body, investigators found a man's shirt tied around her wrists, which helped determine the main suspect in the case is quite tall. Additionally, a clear footprint was discovered next to the entry gate post, providing further evidence. They also located a receipt for Garo jacket, which Sharon never received. After a forensic examination, it was determined that Sharon had died only a few hours before her body was found. It was clear she had been held captive for several days, from Saturday to Tuesday. The perpetrator had been extremely cruel, as there were signs of strangulation on her neck, and she had choked on her own blood. Forensic experts found that her ribs were crushed, indicating the killer may have been kneeling on her chest. She also suffered a severe head injury and bleeding from multiple stab wounds. Both sides of her jaw were broken, her nose was fractured, and her cheek was torn by a tooth that had been knocked out from the force of the attack. On April 4, 1975, about 200 friends, relatives, and local residents gathered at a community center. They hoped that the killer would soon be caught. 9 months prior to Sharon's murder. Another brutal crime occurred in Canada, the killing of a teenage girl in Chatoy. 12-year-old Norma O'Brien was murdered on the evening of July 9, 1974. After leaving home to play water polo, she discovered the pool was closed for repairs. Norma returned to the pond, but she never made it back home. That same evening, she was reported missing. The family was convinced that Norma would not have left on her own, so they started looking for her. The next day, her partially clothed body was discovered in a field near the pool. Norma's murder resembled that of Sharon, who was also found in the same area, brutally beaten and strangled. The two crime scenes were approximately a half-hour's drive apart, leading to speculation that they might have been committed by the same individual, although there is no definitive evidence to support this theory. Following Sharon's murder on June 23, 1975, 14-year-old Debbie Fisher disappeared in Chatoy while riding her red bicycle home. She was later found in the forest, unclothed but without signs of sexual assault. Debbie had died from a blow to the head with a stone. Subsequently, a 17-year-old male suspect confessed to the crime, but his identity is kept private due to his age. The suspect claimed that he was returning home on his moped around 6:30 p.m. when he spotted Debbie riding her bicycle and carrying milk. After observing her closely, he devised a sinister plan. He greeted her, and she responded in kind. He then overtook her, concealed his moped in the bushes, and sat on the curb, pretending to cry. Concerned, Debbie stopped, and the suspect called her over, prompting her to step closer to him. He grabbed her and began to assault her. He threw the milk into the field, and she lost consciousness. Then, he hid her bike in the bushes and attempted to rape her but was unsuccessful. In a fit of rage, he struck her on the head with a rock, causing her death. He concealed her body in an abandoned car in the forest and fled on his moped. Debbie's killer later admitted killing Norma O'Brien, but he denied any involvement in Sharon's killing. He had an alibi at the time of Sharon's murder, so he was not considered a suspect in that case. He was convicted of murdering two girls, Debbie and Norma, and due to his age, served only a few years in prison before being released. He now lives and works in Montreal, near the location where Sharon's body was discovered. Police gathered a significant amount of evidence related to Sharon's murder. However, the outcome was not what they had hoped for. 13 months went by without identifying a primary suspect for charges. They found 38 individuals who might be linked to that tragic night. 6 of these 38 individuals were detained, but ultimately, all were released due to a lack of evidence. Sharon's close friends were also interviewed, and they all had alibis. Some were at a pizzeria, while others were at home watching a game. The investigation became increasingly difficult and gradually reached a dead end as investigators could not find new clues. And it appeared that everyone had given up, except for the mother of Sharon's. Sharon's mother, Yvonne, was frantic as she tried to piece together what had happened to her daughter. Yvonne realized that Sharon couldn't have gone far from home by the time she left the house to go to the pizza shop. On the way, Sharon was supposed to meet a neighbor, who was also returning home from work. For years, the neighbor would walk the same path, but that day he claimed he didn't see Sharon on the sidewalk. Since Sharon had not traveled far, she should have been kidnapped right after saying goodbye to her friend. The kidnapper had only a few minutes to act, and somehow he managed to do it without being seen. Unfortunately, there were no witnesses to Sharon's abduction, making it seem like the perfect crime. Sharon's mother believed it was crucial to pay attention to all the neighbors on their street. Someone should have noticed the suspicious stranger or recognized him if he lived nearby. Detectives described the killer and rapist as being around 20 years old, likely living with his parents. They suspected that he had psychological issues, possibly including obsessive behaviors or hostility towards women. The detectives believed this crime was not the first committed by the suspect, and if he wasn't apprehended soon, it wouldn't be the last. They were convinced that several people were involved in both the kidnapping and the subsequent violence. It was also thought that one of the attackers could have been an unpredictable stranger with a knife who initially targeted another girl, Cheryl, but fled when come across by nearby witnesses. Witnesses described the attacker after Cheryl's assault. Despite thorough searches, he could not be found. It was statistically unlikely for two rapists and kidnappers to be active at the same time in one of the city's safest neighborhoods, prompting detectives concluded that the same person was responsible for the attack on Cheryl and the murder of Sharon. The attacker's behavior suggested he knew the area well, allowing him to navigate without leaving evidence or raising suspicion among residents. Detectives, along with Cheryl's mother, concluded that the assailant likely lived nearby. They characterized the attacker as a sadist. Typically, individuals with such tendencies follow a predictable pattern. They seek out compliant victims, initially presenting themselves as charming and sweet to gain trust. Over time, however, they become increasingly cruel and demanding. It all begins with control, followed by humiliation, and then they start mocking the victim. In this context, relationships with women often develop, and the sadist gradually shifts from seeking a partner to becoming a predator on the hunt. As a result, the police decided to thoroughly investigate all local residents with histories of harassment and domestic violence. Their goal was to find and question the knife-wielding attacker who had assaulted Cheryl. He matched the profile of the criminal, socially awkward and resorting to a knife instead of conversation. He was unlikely to be a successful individual or possess high intelligence. This type of person usually had a history of violence and preferred to use brute force to achieve his goals instead of clever tactics or deception. It was clear he lacked self-control, easily losing his temper and being ready to fight at any moment. The most alarming part of this situation is that the police are chasing a suspect who could be a serial killer, who needs to be stopped immediately. While he tried to run away from the detectives, they continued their search for him. Unfortunately, many crucial technologies we have today, such as DNA analysis, surveillance cameras, and phone geolocation, had not yet been developed at that time, leaving the investigators with limited resources. Although detectives investigated quickly and professionally, but 6 years after Sharon's body was found, the killer struck again. A 12-year-old girl named Temmie was ferociously murdered. It is believed that the sadistic attacker, after assaulting a 16-year-old named Sharon, began targeting younger girls for his crimes. When Temmie's body was discovered, it was revealed that the attacker had grabbed her and started to molest her. Then, he attempted to rape her but was unsuccessful. In a fit of rage, he struck her on the head with a rock, leading to her death. Although detectives investigated quickly and professionally, but 6 years after Sharon's body was found, the killer struck again. The second victim was a 12-year-old schoolgirl named Temmie Leakey. She was ferociously murdered. It is believed that after attacking 16-year-old Sharon, the perpetrator chose to target younger girls for his crimes. When Temmie's body was found, the same police officers who had been investigating Sharon's murder took on this case. They quickly noticed the similarities between the two murders, which further supported the theory of a serial killer. On March 20, 1981, Temmie was visiting her grandmother when she disappeared just a few blocks from her grandmother's house. Later, Temmie's mother found her glasses on the sidewalk. When she returned home, the woman immediately reported her daughter missing to the police. They identified a witness who saw a man in a beige raincoat get out of a small red car and force a screaming girl into it. That same evening, Temmie was found barely alive on the street. A man came to the police station to report a serious matter. He saw Temmie was naked and covered with clothes. Doctors worked hard to save her, but unfortunately, she died. The examination revealed that she had been strangled. Although she was not raped, there were traces of male fluid found on her clothes. The attacker had been careless, leaving behind enough evidence that connected this case to other brutal murders. Despite the detectives' efforts, the investigation hit a dead end. Meanwhile, in nearby areas of Canada, there were reports of similar assaults on girls and young women. In 1971, 17-year-old Lisa Blaze was found dead just a few meters from her home in Montreal. She had left a bar early in the morning, suffered a blow to the head, and was raped. This case has not yet been resolved. Because there are so many open cases, the police have difficulty determining whether these cases are related or not. In 2000, Sharon's mother reached out to the police, requesting a re-evaluation of her daughter's case using modern techniques. At that time, advancements in technology, especially in DNA analysis, had made it possible to investigate cases more effectively. However, a week later, she was disappointed to learn that most of the evidence from the year Sharon was murdered had disappeared. The few surviving items from 1995 included Sharon's clothing and belongings possibly linked to a suspect. Forensic scientists tested a shirt belonging to a man but found that the DNA did not match Sharon. Although no matches were identified in the database, the DNA sample was preserved for future comparisons with any suspects that might emerge later on. In June 2004, the police received a tip about a garage where Sharon might have been held by her killer. When detectives investigated, they found no new evidence. They collected 3 DNA samples from the site, but none matched Sharon's DNA or the materials found on her clothing. Ultimately, this lead turned out to be false. In 2012, a $10,000 reward was offered to anyone with information leading to the arrest of the killer of Sharon. This announcement suggested that the police might have new leads in the case and were seeking help from the public. They established a special hotline to make it easier for people to share information, and the investigation has been reopened. However, like previous efforts, this initiative did not result in any breakthroughs. Detectives revisited the case involving Cheryl's attack in hopes of identifying the perpetrator. They arranged for Cheryl to undergo hypnosis. During the session, she was shown photos of various men, including serial killer William Patrick Fife. She said her attacker looked very similar to William, a Canadian serial killer who was convicted of murdering 5 women in Montreal. He claimed to have had 9 victims, but authorities could only confirm 5. Detectives had long suspected his involvement in the girls' murders and tried to link him to these cases. However, he denied any guilt and claimed he only started killing in 1979. It's important to highlight that Sharon was murdered in 1975. Regrettably, no evidence was found that connected him to the case of Sharon's. Later on, investigators later looked potential connections between the girls' murders and other dangerous criminals in Canada. One suspect was Mike French, a member of the Montreal biker gang Satan. He lived close to Sharon when she was killed in 1975 but moved away with his parents 2 years later. Those who knew him described him as aggressive and cruel, suggesting he could have been responsible for the girls' deaths. Some witnesses reported hearing Mike boast about his involvement in violent acts, but once again, the police faced challenges. Mike was killed in a gang conflict in November, taking with him any potential information about his connection to the murders. His murder also remains unsolved. Ultimately, all these leads were mere speculation. The Sharon family was outraged by the police's lack of professionalism. They committed to fighting for justice until the end, determined to find and hold the criminal accountable. Sharon's mother felt that this fight was not just for her daughter, but also for other parents mourning the loss of their children. In 2015, Sharon's mother was featured on television with 9 other families, accused the police of being unable to handle the case. A new development in the case occurred in June 2022 when a match was found in a DNA database through genetic genealogy. A DNA sample from a man's shirt discovered at the scene of Sharon's murder was matched to Franklin Maywood Romine, who had died in 1982. His body was exhumed for analysis, and DNA confirmation was obtained on May 2, 2023. Franklin resembled the suspect described by witnesses. He lived nearby where the attack occurred, and his car matched the tire tracks found near Sharon's body. He also had a troubled criminal history, including convictions for assault and rape. This evidence was crucial in resolving Sharon's murder case. Although no one could be charged or tried, investigators were able to bring closure to the case. The tragic murder of Sharon Pryor, a 16-year-old schoolgirl, has been solved, thanks to advancements in DNA testing and the determined efforts of her family. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of John Parker. John Parker was born in 1970. He, along with his older brother, grew up in Indiana, United States. Born into a middle-class family, John was an ambitious young man with a strong desire for independence and self-improvement. Right after graduating from high school, he began looking for ways to make money. His brother recalls that John's first job was as a waiter's assistant in a restaurant, but he left the position quickly for unknown reasons, and he feeling frustrated at work. However, this setback did not dampen his ambitions. Soon after, he found a new job that offered him greater independence and helped him realize his true passion, sales. John's career took off when he became a door-to-door salesman for Kirby vacuum cleaners. At first, his family doubted his decision, but he quickly proved them wrong. By the end of his first year, John had become the top salesperson in the area. He worked diligently, often putting in 12 to 16 hours a day, which earned him recognition at company meetings and the respect of his peers. John's success inspired other salespeople, who came to him for guidance, new ideas, and motivation, and he happily took on a leadership role. During this period, John met Judy, a 20-year-old from Texas. She comes from a low-income family. Born in October 1969, Judy was confident and outgoing. Although John wasn't looking to hire new salespeople at the time, Judy's enthusiasm and assertiveness convinced him to give her a chance. Despite being young, but Judy had already experienced significant life events. At 14, with her parents' permission, she had gotten married and later divorced, resulting in 2 children, Christina and Daniel Hicks. John decided to mentor Judy in vacuum cleaner sales. Judy to be a quick learner, and she not only earning a spot on John's sales team but also winning his affection. The two eventually started dating each other. John's life was thriving. He was renowned for his exceptional sales skills and training abilities, and Judy's support in both his personal and professional life. This foundation gave John the confidence to launch his own business in Michigan, specializing in selling and servicing Kirby vacuum cleaners. As part of his venture, John offered training sessions to salespeople, sharing effective strategies he developed and the passion that drove his success. His company rose to become one of the area's top performers, and John consistently credited his success to Judy's unwavering support. In 1992, John and Judy got married, having established stability in their professional lives. In the following years, they dedicate themselves to demonstrating what a good salesperson can achieve in life. The couple had 2 daughters, Tiffany and Erica, in addition to Judy's 2 children from a previous relationship, Christina and Daniel. After that, their family moved residences several times, always to nicer houses, giving their children access to better schools, luxury cars, and regular vacations. Initially, John had no issues with his stepchildren. While Daniel was energetic and sometimes mischievous, Christina was a sweet and well-behaved child. John and Judy enjoyed a comfortable life, and John used his wealth as motivation for young salespeople he trained, proving that hard work and determination can bring about a prosperous life. As Christina and Daniel entered teenage years, problems arose. Christina began associating with people who exhibited poor behavior and allegedly engaged in underage drinking and even drug use. At the same time, Daniel, who was 13, was dealing with anger issues and hanging out with a questionable group of friends. One incident occurred when Daniel took his father John's car and drove recklessly through the neighborhood with his friends, knocking down and damaging several mailbox posts. To avoid trouble with the police, John took responsibility for the damage and personally paid the affected homeowners the next day. Around this time, John received a complaint from his stepson's school regarding the boy's misconduct. Unfortunately, the situation escalated, and John physically struck the young man, causing further strain on their relationship. 9 years after the family began living together, Judy decided to take them on a trip to Texas, where she grew up. During this visit, Judy expressed her concerns to her brother about her troubled marriage and the mistreatment of Christina and Daniel by John. However, Judy blamed John for her children's problems and she made excuses for their misbehavior, which made their family problems worse. John's life became even more complicated when he began to suspect his wife of having an affair, specifically with one of his employees. To uncover the truth, John took matters into his own hands. He installed cameras in several parts of the office and eventually obtained clear evidence of his wife's infidelity. This discovery was a real shock to John, completely changing his previously happy and friendly personality. John's behavior deteriorated as he began drinking excessively, leading to intense arguments with Judy and violent outbursts towards his children. When Tiffany's teacher informed John that she hadn't brought her homework, he punished her with a belt, leaving visible marks. The teacher reported the incident to social services the next day after seeing the injuries. Before social services arrived, John intimidated the children by implying that if they wanted to maintain their comfortable life, they should remain silent about the beating. As a result, Tiffany falsely accused Daniel of being responsible, and he didn't deny it. John's bad mood affected not only his family, but also his employees and the company's clients, who suffered through his fits of anger as a result of his wife's infidelity. In an attempt to create distance between his wife and the person she was involved with, John moved his family to a more affluent area in Crown Point, Indiana. Despite still loving his wife and hoping that a change of environment would give them a fresh start, the situation did not improve. While Judy lost weight and changed her style to improve her appearance, John did the opposite. He let himself go, grew a beard, started smoking, and only wore jeans. His preoccupation with his personal problems left him constantly distracted. As a result, the business began to suffer, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. John was forced to sell his boat to stay financially afloat. Rumors spread throughout the office that Judy was having an affair with Jeff, John's closest business associate. Although the validity of these rumors was uncertain, but they put more strain on John and Judy's already troubled marriage. John's world was turned upside down when Judy told him she wanted a divorce. However, John made it clear that if she left him, she would be left with nothing. He felt he had given her everything, including lifting her out of poverty, accepting her children, providing her with luxuries, and loving her. However, he became exasperated when she decides to leave, threatening that if she leaves him, she will leave with empty hands. John possessed a crucial piece of evidence, a recording of Judy having an affair with Jeff. As a result, their relationship became more strained in early 2003, which also affected their children's behavior. On Thursday, April 17, 2013, John and Judy attempted to resolve their issues over dinner at a restaurant. After finishing dinner, they called home to check on the children and said they would be back soon. However, their plans changed when Christina asked them to stop by the office because she had left a school notebook there. Leaving the restaurant, they went to the company and John brought the rest of the dinner to Jeff, who was working late. When they arrived at the office in an isolated industrial area around 10 p.m., John went inside to talk to Jeff while Judy quickly retrieved the notebook and returned to their car. Minutes after, John left the office. He opened the rear door on the driver's side of his vehicle to retrieve something. Suddenly, 2 loud gunshots rang out, and John fell to the ground in the parking lot. Judy and Jeff immediately called 911 to report the incident. Police and medical units arrived at the scene quickly. Sadly, 33-year-old John Parker was found to have been shot in the back of the head and was pronounced dead at the scene. During the investigation, Judy, who was inside the vehicle when the shots were fired, was questioned by the authorities. She told them she was sitting in the car when her husband, John, came out of the office and opened the rear door on the driver's side. Her account was limited, as she did not see what happened next, only hearing the 2 loud gunshots after John opened the door. Judy remembered that when she heard the shots, she immediately hid behind the seat. When she cautiously lifted her head, she caught a brief glimpse of a man wearing dark clothing fleeing the scene. They also noticed that John's wallet was missing, leading them to initially believe it was a robbery. As investigators took a closer look, they started to question the details surrounding John's death. Since no one knew about Judy and John's plans, several inconsistencies stood out. What could be the motive for targeting an empty industrial area at night when there would be no one around? If the goal was robbery, it doesn't make sense that the perpetrator would kill John before taking his belongings, especially when he was wearing a $20,000 gold Rolex and other easily accessible valuables. Moreover, why didn't the thief search John's pockets? This is a common action in robberies. The investigation into John's death raised more questions than it answered. 2 bullet casings found at the scene matched Judy's claim of hearing 2 shots. It was clear that one of the shots had killed John instantly, but there was no official information about the second shot. The investigators started by taking a statement from Judy, the key witness to the incident. Judy reported that her husband had previously gotten into an argument with one of his employees. She was able to identify the employee involved in the argument, but beyond this, she had no additional information to provide beyond what she had already shared at the scene. The investigators also spoke with Jeff, who was inside the office at the time of the shooting. However, he was unable to provide any useful information, as he did not exit the office until after the shots had been fired and the incident was over. The authorities informed Christina that her stepfather had passed away. After nearly ruling out a robbery motive, detectives shifted their investigation to focus on the people close to John, starting with an employee who had previously expressed resentment towards him. The employee confirmed that they had a significant disagreement, but claimed that it had been peacefully resolved. He also provided an alibi, which was thoroughly investigated and verified. The investigation was expanded to cover almost all individuals associated with John, including those he did business with. Past and present employees, competitors in his industry, and his personal friends and social connections. The investigation into John's murder revealed a new lead, involving Judy. Unlike what is typically expected of a grieving person, her behavior during her husband's funeral was unusual, as she seemed cheerful and was chatting with friends. Another notable observation was that her ex-husband seemed completely unbothered by the incident, calmly reading a newspaper just 4 days after John's murder. Daniel, 15, was brought in for questioning on suspicion of being involved in the murder. The police suspected him because of an incident 6 months earlier. At that time, gang members told the police that Daniel had paid them to kill his stepfather, John. However, the gang members claimed they never planned to carry out the murder and just kept the money. The police didn't find their story believable and took the money, but they didn't seem to do anything more about it at the time. Later, after John was killed, the police decided to re-examine whether Daniel might be involved in the crime. During questioning, Daniel admitted to paying people to hurt John, but not intending to kill him, but rather injure him, specifically by breaking his legs. Authorities did detain one of the individuals Daniel to have hired, but this person was released after a thorough investigation verified their alibi. Daniel was eventually released after 9 days due to insufficient evidence and because he was a minor. As the case unfolded, it became clear that John had prior conflicts with the children of Judy, Christina, and Daniel. This led to further scrutiny of Daniel and raised suspicions about Judy's 17-year-old daughter, Christina. Christina denied any involvement when questioned by investigators. Both Christina and Daniel expressed a desire to eliminate John, leading investigators to wonder where the money for these schemes came from, and they suspected that Judy might be the one giving them the money to carry out these plans. When investigators looked more closely, they discovered that before John's death, he and Judy's relationship had deteriorated partly due to Judy's infidelity. Despite this, it appeared John had no intention of leaving Judy and was instead working on saving their troubled marriage. Judy's main reason for targeting her husband appeared to be financial gain. Detectives found that John had 2 life insurance policies worth $1 million. Following John's death, Judy tried to collect the insurance money, but the insurance company initially denied her claim due to the ongoing investigation into his death. The payment was also postponed because John's father suspected Judy was involved in his son's death and was investigating further. The case eventually stalled due to lack of concrete evidence, but a lot has changed in John's family. Judy was rarely at home, she devoting her time to her new partner, Jeff, who was also John's manager. As a result, Christina and Daniel took on more responsibilities, caring for their younger sisters, Tiffany and Erica. After several months, Judy and Jeff decided to relocate out of state with John's younger daughters, Tiffany and Erica. Around this time, Daniel went to live with his biological father, while Christina remained in the house, now pregnant and in a relationship with her boyfriend. The investigation was stalled, but the authorities didn't give up. They kept the case open and repeatedly reviewed the files, hoping to find a clue new. This persistence eventually paid off. The detectives received a new lead, which led them to question some of the classmates of Christina and Daniel. The classmates confessed to selling a gun to Christina and Daniel, which sparked an investigation into a family John-owned piece of land that Christina used for target practice. When investigators searched the area, they found multiple spent bullet casings. Laboratory analysis of these casings revealed a crucial piece of evidence. The casings matched those found at John's 2007 crime scene. New information came to light when a narcotics officer revealed that Christina's ex-boyfriend had been involved in a drug-related case. With the hope of receiving a lighter sentence, Christina's ex-boyfriend revealed a conversation he had with Judy. In the conversation, Judy mentioned that her son Daniel was the one who fired the fatal shot. When confronted with this new evidence, Christina began to cooperate. As the owner of the gun used in the crime, the 21-year-old Christina admitted to buying the weapon. She also admitted that on the night of the incident, she had asked her parents to visit the office, claiming she had left her homework behind there. Christina admitted to being involved in plot to kill John, and stated that her younger brother Daniel was designated as the person who would open fire. When Daniel was found and arrested in Arizona, he was confronted with the new evidence and Christina's confession. Daniel confessed to shooting John, but claimed that their mother, Judy, was the one who had come up with the plan. According to Daniel, Judy had stolen $7,500 by forging company checks and had used this money to try to hire someone to kill John, but ultimately decided to have Daniel do it instead. Judy's original plan failed when the individuals she hired took the payment but did not complete the task. At that point, Judy instructed them to buy a gun for her son to use instead. Furthermore, Daniel revealed that it was Judy who created the excuse for her and John to leave the house that night. When Christina called to pick up her homework that she had left at company, he shot John in the head. The second shot occurred accidentally as Daniel rummaged through John's pockets, searching for his wallet as his mother had instructed. Following the shooting, Daniel returned home without alerting his younger sisters. His sister Christina helped by distracting Tiffany and Erica with television, allowing Daniel to enter the house unnoticed. Christina and Daniel claimed that their mother manipulated them into committing the crime by telling them they had been abused by John and promising that by doing so, they would gain a better life with more freedom and financial stability. However, this was not Judy's first attempt to harm her husband, as she had previously tried to poison his food, which led to he being briefly hospitalized. By the end of 2007, Christina and Daniel were formally charged with murder and conspiracy. However, Christina entered a not guilty plea for the conspiracy charge and was released on bail a few months later. In 2008, when Daniel was 20 years old, he pleaded guilty to conspiring to kill his stepfather, John. As part of a deal, Daniel agreed to cooperate and testify against his mother in exchange for a lighter sentence. Instead of being charged with murder, he would face a sentence of 20 to 25 years in prison for conspiracy. According to Daniel, the plan to kill John began nearly a year before the incident, when he was just 14 years old. Judy and Christina initially brought the idea to him. He claimed, and Judy supplied him with a gun and other necessary items for the crime. These items included money to buy black clothing, gloves, and a mask. His mother also instructed him on how to commit the crime without leaving any evidence behind, including taking a thorough shower to eliminate gunpowder residue after returning home. Then Judy took charge of getting rid of the evidence, including the gun, clothes, and her husband's wallet. 6 years later, in July 2009, Judy knew she couldn't escape the law anymore and turned herself in. She agreed to plead guilty to conspiracy to commit murder, admitting she had planned, carried out, and tried to cover up the crime. The prosecutors wanted Judy to spend the rest of her life in prison, with a minimum sentence of 28 years and a maximum sentence of 35 years. Judy, who was nearly 40 years old at the time, was given a 33-year prison sentence in August 2009. The next month, her co-conspirator Daniel received a 23-year sentence. Christina was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Press reports said Daniel was released in 2017 after participating in a community transition court program and that he subsequently chose to live a low-profile life. Christina served 4 years of her sentence and was released in 2013, but sadly died from a drug overdose shortly after. This case is a tragic example of how greed can lead people to commit terrible crimes. Judy's actions had devastating consequences for her family. Despite overcoming early struggles and achieving success, her desire for more led her to destroy the life of a successful businessman, John Parker. Her actions also deeply affected her 4 children, leaving 2 in prison and taking away their father. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Anupama Gulati. Anupama, who lives with her husband and 2 children, was born and raised in Dehradun, but her parents and brother were often worried because they could not reach her on the phone. Since her family used to call her frequently, this loss of contact worried her family. Anupama's brother, Sujan Pradhan, decided to call Anupama's husband, Rajesh Gulati, whom she had been married to since 1999, to ask about his sister. However, every time Sujan Pradhan called, Rajesh would say that Anupama was either busy or had gone on a business trip. This went on for about 2 weeks. During this time, Anupama contacted her brother via email, informing him that she was completely fine and very happy with her husband and 2 children. This reassured her family. However, when they continued to be unable to reach Anupama on the phone, her parents asked Sujan Pradhan to go to Dehradun and meet Anupama. On December 12, 2010, when Sujan Pradhan went to Rajesh's house, Rajesh greeted him unfriendly and said that Anupama was elsewhere and he could not meet her right away. On the other hand, Sujan then tried to break into Rajesh's house, leading to heated arguments between the two. However, Rajesh did not allow Sujan to enter the house. When Sujan asked Rajesh about Anupama, Rajesh did not provide a satisfactory answer. Sujan decided to go to the nearby police station and filed a missing report for his younger sister, Anupama Gulati. In the report, he also said that he was trying to enter the house but was prevented by Rajesh. The police found the case suspicious and went to Rajesh Gulati's house. When Rajesh saw the police with Sujan, Rajesh tried to remain calm. The police asked Rajesh about Anupama, but Rajesh did not answer directly and tried to distract them. However, the police soon discovered Rajesh's cunning and decided to conduct a full search of the house. During the search, the police noticed a closed room. When the room was opened, there was nothing unusual except a large freezer. The police found the presence of a freezer very strange because such appliances are commonly used in large shops and restaurants. The police wondered why Rajesh would buy such a large freezer for his small family, but he just kept quiet. The police decided to open the freezer to investigate and found many small black bags inside. When they opened one bag, they discovered pieces of meat and then took out some more envelopes. The surprise came when they found a human skull in one of these envelopes. Rajesh Gulati then confessed to the police that the pieces were the body of his wife, Anupama. He broke down in tears and narrated the story. After his confession, the police arrested Rajesh and took him to a local court. There, he was remanded in custody for 5 days. During further investigation, the police discovered a surprising piece of information. Rajesh explained that he had met Anupama at Delhi University, where they both studied and got to know each other. They soon developed feelings for each other and started falling in love. Initially, they kept their relationship a secret from their families, but later decided to go public and asked for permission to get married. Both families agreed and they had a grand wedding in 1999. After marriage, Rajesh's career grew rapidly, and he found a job in a large company in the US. Rajesh and Anupama moved to the US so that he could work as a software engineer. They were living comfortably now, and they had bought a house, which meant that their finances were stable. However, after a few months, Anupama started feeling lonely because Rajesh often went to work every day and she had to stay home alone. During her boredom, Anupama often contacted a close friend of Rajesh's. Later, Rajesh found out that Anupama had become close friends with a close friend of his. Rajesh felt uncomfortable knowing that Anupama and his friend were talking on the phone frequently. This caused many arguments between them. Rajesh asked Anupama many times to stay away from his friend, but she did not listen. This made the situation worse in their home. However, in 2006, Anupama gave birth to twins, and the birth of a daughter and a son brought happiness and harmony to the family. While living in the US, Rajesh and Anupama enjoyed a fairly comfortable life. However, that was completely disrupted in 2007 and 2008 when the US fell into an economic recession, leaving many unemployed. Rajesh, after trying to keep his job for a while, also fell into unemployment. To sustain the family, Rajesh used his savings, but as the situation could not last forever, the savings eventually ran out. At that time, Rajesh had no choice but to sell his house in the US. After selling the house, Rajesh decided to return to India with his family. However, Anupama continued to keep in touch with Rajesh's friends over the phone, and this caused a major argument that led to a conflict between Rajesh and Anupama. The arguments escalated and the couple took the matter to the family court. The court eventually decided that Rajesh would provide Anupama with 20,000 rupees per month to meet their expenses. Thereafter, Rajesh and Anupama lived together in a rented flat for a few months in a place called Governor. After some struggle, Rajesh got a job in a big company in Kolkata, about 990 miles away from his home. For the sake of his job, Rajesh had to leave his wife and 2 children and start a new life in Kolkata. In Kolkata, around 2009, Rajesh met a married woman who was suffering from an unhappy marriage. Her husband was not good and often abused her. When Rajesh heard the story of this woman, he felt sympathy for her, and gradually, the two became close friends. Gradually, their friendship developed into love. After some time, they decided to marry each other secretly at a temple in Kolkata, without informing any of their family or friends. Rajesh returned to his normal routine after his second marriage. He maintained regular contact with his first wife, Anupama, went to work daily, and kept his second marriage a secret from everyone. However, Anupama noticed changes in Rajesh's behavior and suspected that he was involved with another woman in Kolkata. But she was unaware that Rajesh had actually remarried. The couple continued to argue over this issue, and their relationship became so strained that Anupama started thinking about divorce. However, Rajesh successfully convinced Anupama, and they did not go through with the divorce. But when Rajesh failed to pay Anupama the court-ordered maintenance of 20,000 rupees. These financial disputes finally reached a boiling point on October 17, 2010, when Rajesh and Anupama had a huge argument. Rajesh becomes enraged and violently pushes his wife, Anupama, causing her head to hit the corner of the bed. As a result, she starts bleeding profusely. Initially, Rajesh is shocked, but moments later, he lifts a pillow from the bed and uses it to smother Anupama. However, unbeknownst to Rajesh, Anupama is already deceased. Rajesh then frantically searches for a place to hide his wife's body, aware that his children will soon return home from school. With time of the essence, he moves Anupama's body to the second bathroom in the house and locks the door. As he tries to devise a plan to dispose of the body without arousing suspicion, his children arrive home from school and ask about their mother. Rajesh fabricates a story, telling them that their mother suddenly left for Delhi. Rajesh's children believed their mother, Anupama, had gone to visit their grandparents in Delhi. However, Rajesh had other plans. While the children were in school, he went to the market and purchased several items, including a deep freezer, an electric chainsaw, a stone cutter machine, and small black envelopes. When Rajesh brought these items home, he hid them in a separate room. When the children left for school the next day, Rajesh began the gruesome process of dismembering Anupama's body with an electric saw. He closed all the doors and windows to block out the noise. According to Rajesh's statement, Rajesh cut Anupama's body into 72 pieces. He then placed each piece into black bags and carefully stored the bags in the deep freezer to prevent the smell of the deceased from spreading. This process took Rajesh several days to complete. During this time, Rajesh continued to deceive Anupama's parents and brother by making excuses whenever they called, unaware of the horrific events unfolding at his residence. Rajesh took steps to cover up Anupama's disappearance by making excuses to their neighbors and telling their children that their mother had traveled to Delhi. He also had access to Anupama's email account, which allowed him to maintain communication with Sujan Pradhan, Anupama's brother, making it seem as though Anupama was still alive. Following the murder, Rajesh took the children on a weekend trip to Mussoorie in Uttarakhand. During the trip, he would collect 2 or 3 envelopes from the fridge containing pieces of Anupama's body and dispose of them in the forests or gorge along the way. This revelation shocked everyone, and the police began searching the areas where Rajesh claimed to have disposed of Anupama's remains. After an extensive search, the police found some black bags containing body parts in the surrounding forests and gorge. Based on this evidence, Rajesh Gulati was arrested and sent to jail. Rajesh Gulati's twin children were sent to Delhi to live with Anupama's brother, Sujan Pradhan. A court had granted Sujan official custody of the children on March 7, 2011. Rajesh Gulati's father, Satyapal Gulati, appealed this decision but was unsuccessful. On November 3, 2012, the court dismissed his appeal and confirmed that Chari would retain custody of the children. Evidence provided by the police revealed the horrific nature of the crime. Rajesh Gulati had brutally murdered his wife and then cut her body into 72 pieces. After a 7-year trial, Rajesh Gulati was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment on September 1, 2017. He was also ordered to pay a fine of 1.5 million rupees. The court ordered that 70,000 rupees of the fine would go to the state treasury, while the remaining amount would be deposited in the names of the twin children. The children would have access to this money only after they came of age. Rajesh Gulati was sentenced in a lower court, but he appealed this decision in a higher court in 2018. However, there has been no ruling on his appeal yet, resulting in his prolonged imprisonment. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Jennifer Schuett. Jennifer Schuett is an 8-year-old girl who has just completed elementary school. She lives with her single mother, Elaine, who has worked hard to provide her daughter with a comfortable life. Elaine always tries to give Jennifer a happy childhood, full of love and care. Thanks to that, Jennifer has become a cheerful, active girl who loves to explore and learn. However, Jennifer still has a common fear in children, which is the fear of the dark. Therefore, she often sleeps in the same room as her mother. Elaine understands this fear and is always by her daughter's side. On the night of August 9, 2009, mother and daughter slept in the same room again. But Jennifer did not sleep well, constantly turning and lightly kicking her mother, making it difficult for Elaine to sleep. Elaine woke up at 2:30 a.m. and suggested Jennifer sleep in her own room so she could rest before the new workday. But Jennifer replied convincingly, "Mom, I'm going to sleep in my own room tonight because I love you," and she went to her own room to sleep for the rest of the night. Elaine regretted the decision for a long time, but at the time, she couldn't have known what would happen next. The next morning, Elaine went to wake Jennifer but found her missing. She found the window facing the parking lot wide open. Elaine quickly called 911. When the police arrived, she said she hadn't heard any noise or screaming after Jennifer went back to her room to sleep alone. Their apartment was on the first floor, and the window in Jennifer's room looked out onto the parking lot, causing Elaine to fear that someone might have seen Jennifer and entered the room through the window. Elaine realized that their apartment wasn't the ideal place for her and her little girl to live, but it was the best they could afford at the time. However, Elaine's parents decided to help her and her daughter find a new place to live. They bought a small house nearby and renovated it. Jennifer and her mother planned to move there in a few months, and they were there the day before Jennifer went missing. After her daughter went missing, Elaine was extremely sad and remorseful. She said that Jennifer was all she had and prayed that she could return. The police worked tirelessly to find Jennifer. Fortunately, Elaine did not have to wait long for news. Around 6:30 p.m. that same day, the police received a call from parents whose children were playing in the fields and accidentally discovered a little girl. When they arrived at the scene, the police found 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett lying in the middle of a field, 5 kilometers from her home. Jennifer's condition was serious, with a cut on her throat from ear to ear, causing her to lose a lot of blood and turn pale. Jennifer was taken to the hospital in critical condition, where doctors tried to save her life. Due to the injury to her neck, Jennifer was unable to speak. After surgery, Jennifer's condition stabilized, the bleeding stopped, and her breathing was steady. However, when Jennifer woke up from surgery, her mental state changed dramatically. She began to fear all men, including male doctors, making it difficult for her to recover. During this time, Jennifer was constantly panicking and even reacted defensively when male doctors tried to approach her. Elaine tried to explain to her daughter that everyone around her wanted to help and care for her. However, Jennifer did not trust anyone. Her behavior was understandable when she finally revealed what happened to her that night. The challenge was to gently get the information out of her. Now, considering she was only 8 years old, this was really difficult. Jennifer was too scared to speak directly to the investigators, so the detectives gave her a notebook and pen to write down her answers to their questions. Because she was afraid of men, Jennifer wrote a letter to her mother, who then forwarded it to the police. Although she was only 8 years old, Jennifer's written responses were surprisingly detailed and accurate. Jennifer explained that she went into her room, turned on the lights, and began reading a book to help her fall asleep. She eventually fell asleep but was then awakened by a stranger who carried her out of the house. The stranger ran down the sidewalk with Jennifer in his arms. As soon as Jennifer realized what was happening, she tried to scream, but the stranger covered her nose and mouth. The stranger then put Jennifer in his car and identified himself as an undercover police officer. However, Jennifer's instincts told her that something was wrong. She looked around and saw her mother's car in the parking lot, which made her even more confused about where they were going and why. Jennifer had been taught that the police were trustworthy, but she had also been warned not to trust strangers. Her fear and recent experiences with strangers made her suspicious of the stranger's words, and she sensed that something was wrong. Jennifer asked the stranger to drop her off at her grandparents' house. But he refused, saying that they were not home. However, she noticed that her grandparents' car was in the driveway, which suggested that he was lying. The man stopped near Jennifer's school, about 3 kilometers from her house. He told her to watch the moon closely and said that her mother would come when the moon changed color. Jennifer waited anxiously for her mother to pick her up, but her mother never showed up. She suspected that the man was preparing for his true intentions. After 5 minutes, the stranger announced that her mother would not be coming and that they needed to drive further. They stopped at a dead-end street, where Jennifer asked the stranger to prove that he was a real police officer. She questioned him, asking where his gun and badge were. When he said that his gun was in the back seat, Jennifer turned around to look for it. That was when the stranger removed her underwear. Jennifer then lost consciousness, so she was not sure how long she was under his control. Jennifer slowly regained consciousness as she was dragged through a field, her ankles constantly rubbing against the road. The pain from the branches and rocks stabbed into her back, but she pretended to be dead and kept quiet, realizing that this was her chance to survive. Her attacker eventually let go of her legs and left her in the field. Jennifer heard him walk away, followed by the sound of his car door slamming and the sound of the engine driving away. When she regained consciousness, Jennifer found that she could not scream, and she was not sure why. She mustered enough strength to bring her right hand to her neck, where she discovered an open wound. Her hand was covered in blood. The exact time she had been missing is unknown, but it is believed that she had been lying in the field for between 12 and 14 hours. As the sun began to set, Jennifer saw the lights of passing cars nearby and heard the sounds of children. A dog approached her several times, seemingly trying to get its owner's attention, but no one came. Throughout her suffering, Jennifer was bitten by fire ants, which helped her stay conscious. Each time she woke up, she could not believe that she was not dead. Jennifer had accepted her fate, thinking that she would not survive. But everything changed when she heard the sounds of children nearby. Suddenly, something hit her leg. When Jennifer later regained consciousness, she found herself being reassured by a police officer who repeatedly told her, "You've been found, you'll be okay. Just stay with me." The officer's words provided comfort to Jennifer as she was loaded into the Lifelight helicopter. The aftermath was a challenging experience for 8-year-old Jennifer, who struggled to communicate due to her inability to speak. She had to write her answers down on paper to convey her story. Additionally, her fear of men made the situation even more complicated. To make her feel more comfortable, her mother stepped in to ask questions on behalf of the police, relaying Jennifer's answers to the officers waiting behind the door. What's remarkable about Jennifer's story is that, despite her ordeal, she was able to remember the stranger's name. She remembered the man telling her his name was Dennis and describing him as fat, with a possible scar on his face. Police also sought the assistance of forensic pathologist Lois Gibson. Although they could only communicate with Jennifer through gestures and notes, they were able to create an extremely detailed composite sketch of the suspect. The sketch was released in the hope of getting information from the public about the identity of the man in the drawing. Meanwhile, police continued to investigate the scene and found Jennifer's clothes about half a mile away, along with a man's clothes. Despite hopes of finding DNA on the clothes to catch the culprit, no matches were found. Jennifer gradually recovered from her injuries. Despite her young age, she showed incredible resilience. During her recovery, there was a moment when she was upset about a chocolate bar that she couldn't eat. She screamed in frustration and let out a weak sound. The doctors were amazed to see that her vocal cords, which had been nearly severed and were not expected to heal, began to miraculously recover. After a while, Jennifer was well enough to be discharged from the hospital. She returned home and went back to school, eventually finishing high school and college. After that, Jennifer decided to become a children's librarian. Even so, she never forgot what happened that night. Every day, she felt like she was chasing a criminal, and that the criminal could be anyone. Jennifer thought that it could be her new neighbor, or a stranger at the post office or the grocery store. She always felt like the person was watching her and would come back to kill her. Fortunately, Jennifer met a guy named Jonathan. For the first time in years, she was able to trust a man. They fell in love and Jennifer felt a little more secure. However, around that time, the clues to her attacker began to fade. The chances of finding him were slim. Her case was passed from investigator to investigator. But still no progress was made. 18 years after that terrible night, Jennifer received a phone call. It was a notice that Detective Tim Cromie was taking over her case and wanted to meet with her. Tim Cromie pledged to do everything he could to catch the criminal. Jennifer trusted him, and Tim Cromie told her that he would do everything in his power until the end of his career to get the answers she needed about this case. To help with the case, Tim decided to involve FBI agent Richard Renison in the investigation. Richard had worked for the Dickinson, Texas police before joining the FBI. Tim and Richard discovered a large amount of evidence collected on the day Jennifer went missing and shortly after she was found. Jennifer's underwear, shirt, and other items belonging to the perpetrator were particularly important, so they sent a sample of the DNA found on the clothing to Quantico, Virginia. Although the detectives knew that technology had advanced significantly in the 19 years since the crime, they understood that the age of the case could cause the evidence to not be prioritized in the lab. Despite the years, their work finally paid off. The man whose DNA was found at the crime scene was Dennis Earl Bradford, the man Jennifer had described years earlier. The 8-year-old Jennifer had described the man with astonishing accuracy, even though she was on pain medication at the time and unable to speak. Dennis Bradford, 39, lived in North Little Rock, Arkansas. His DNA was entered into the national database after an attack on a woman he met at a bar in 1996. Although he was sentenced to 12 years in prison, he only served 4. Dennis was released on parole on February 4, 2000. Less than a year later, police arrested Bradford for drunk driving less than half a mile from his home. He later remarried and worked as a welder until his arrest in 2009. Investigators Tim Cromie and Richard Renison found a lot of information about Dennis. In 1987, Dennis had been arrested in Dickinson, 3 years before the attack on Jennifer. The investigators discovered that he had 2 addresses within 2 miles of Jennifer's residence, and Jennifer was able to confirm his identity as the kidnapper. They then requested a photo of Dennis's driver's license from when he was 19. Upon seeing the photo, they were shocked because the man looked very similar to the sketch created based on Jennifer's description at age 8. On October 19, 2009, Dennis Cyril Bradford was arrested. However, he claimed that he did not remember why he stopped near Jennifer's residence or why he had mistreated her. Dennis also revealed a detail that investigators did not know. After the attack, he felt so overwhelmed by guilt that he attempted suicide with a handgun. Despite reaching for the gun, Dennis was ultimately unable to pull the trigger and decided to seek psychiatric help. During his stay at the psychiatric hospital, Dennis accidentally visited the hospital where Jennifer was still a patient, and he was very close to her at the time. Immediately after the interview, the detectives informed Jennifer of Dennis Bradford's arrest. She expressed gratitude to the detectives, especially Detective Tim Cromie and Agent Richard Renison, for their efforts and their promise not to drop the case. She also admitted that she looked forward to facing Dennis Bradford in court because he was willing to plead guilty and not drag out the trial. Jennifer was given the opportunity to choose a court date, and she chose August 10, the 20th anniversary of the attack. A turning point in the case came on May 10, 2010, a few months before the trial, when Dennis hanged himself in his cell. Jennifer faced another challenge in her life due to the trauma Dennis caused. She almost lost the ability to conceive. Fortunately, Dr. Craig Witz, after hearing Jennifer's story, generously offered her his services for free twice in late 2012. As a happy ending, Jennifer and her husband eventually welcomed their daughter Jenna and then their son Jonah. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Mary Catherine Higdon. Mary Catherine Higdon, born in 1994, was a lively child known for her sense of humor and ability to make others laugh with her witty remarks and impersonations. She enjoyed spending time outdoors and exploring nature, often taking walks around town with her pet frog perched on a shoestring. This early exposure to the natural world instilled in her a deep love and respect for the environment and animals. Mary was also a talented and creative performer. She regularly performed for her family in homemade plays, showing off her vivid imagination and ability to attract attention on stage. Her family recognized her natural talent and envisioned a bright future for her. As she grew older, Mary developed another passion, that was firearms. Under proper guidance, she learned to handle guns responsibly, respecting their power and potential. Through dedication and practice, Mary became a skilled marksman during her high school years. Mary Catherine met the love of her life, Stephen Freeman, who was born on January 1, 1995, in Griffin, Georgia. He was raised in a close-knit family with his parents and brother. As a child, Stephen was known to be happy and friendly, with many friends who described him as laid-back, kind, and helpful. Those who knew him said he genuinely cared for everyone around him. Stephen had a deep appreciation for nature and enjoyed spending time outdoors. Their love for nature led them to enjoy activities like hiking, camping, fishing, and hunting together. This shared interest laid the groundwork for their robust relationship. After graduating from high school, they started a new chapter in their lives. As high school sweethearts, they decided to take their relationship to the next level by moving into a house together in Griffin, Georgia. Living in their own space excited Mary Catherine and Stephen. Stephen's mother welcomed Mary Catherine as more than just her son's partner. She genuinely considered her a daughter and accepted her into their family. Mary Catherine and Stephen visited Stephen's parents every Sunday for a big family dinner, a tradition that strengthened their bond and cemented Mary Catherine's place within the family. Stephen's friends initially had reservations about his relationship with Mary Catherine. However, as they spent more time together, they grew to appreciate how well-suited Mary Catherine and Stephen was. Mary Catherine brought happiness and joy into Stephen's life, and her love for Stephen was admirable. Stephen worked as a metal worker and repaired roofs, while Mary Catherine was a part-time teacher's assistant at a preschool in Milner, Georgia. She also worked at a sporting goods store, where she sold guns and learned about basic gun safety, including how to hold, load, and shoot a gun. This experience was shared with Stephen, who owned several firearms, including shotguns and rifles, which he used for hunting and target practice. He also kept a Glock 42 at home for protection. By the summer of 2018, Mary Catherine and Stephen had been in a relationship for 5 years and were still living together in their apartment in Griffin, Georgia. However, their happiness was shattered on the night of August 1st when Mary Catherine made a frantic 911 call. When the dispatcher answered, Mary Catherine cried out that she had accidentally shot her boyfriend. The police quickly arrived at the apartment and found Mary Catherine in a state of distress. Mary Catherine, hysterical and overcome with grief, cried and hyperventilated as she knelt beside Stephen's lifeless body, repeatedly screaming, "I cannot lose him." Her voice was filled with anguish and despair. As the police gently moved Mary Catherine away from Stephen, they were able to assess his condition. They found that he had been shot in the chest but was still alive. An ambulance was called to rush Stephen to the hospital, where doctors worked to save his life. Despite the medical team's best efforts, Stephen's condition continued to worsen, and he eventually passed away due to the severity of his injuries. Mary Catherine accompanied the police to the police department for a formal interview after Stephen was taken to the hospital. She began by recounting the events of the night that led to her accidentally shooting Stephen. According to Mary Catherine, she was handing Stephen the gun because he usually kept it on the side of his bed at night for safety. However, she stated that they never kept a bullet in the magazine of the guns. During the interview, the police noticed the smell of alcohol on Mary Catherine's breath. As the questioning continued, Mary Catherine's story about the shooting changed. Initially, she said she handed the gun to Stephen, but later claimed she tossed it to him instead. The police were skeptical about her story, knowing that the gun would not fire randomly when thrown, and someone must have pulled the trigger. Furthermore, the location of Stephen's gunshot wound led the police to believe that Mary Catherine must have been pointing the gun directly at him for the bullet to strike where it did. At one point during the interview, Mary Catherine said she shot Stephen out of anger. However, due to technical issues, only feedback was recorded during this part of the conversation, despite the police recording the entire interview. The police believed they had sufficient forensic evidence to prove that Mary Catherine deliberately shot her boyfriend Stephen, even without a crucial part of the recording. At their apartment, investigators found signs of a heated argument before the shooting. The presence of scattered food throughout the house indicated that an altercation had taken place. Additionally, it was found that police officers had visited the house of Mary and Stephen 5 times in the past year due to domestic disputes. The police also discovered evidence that the gun used to shoot Stephen was loaded on the night of the incident, contradicting Mary Catherine's claims. Furthermore, cooking grease was also found on both the gun and the magazine. This discovery led the police to conclude that Mary Catherine, who was cooking dinner at the time, had loaded the gun. After Mary Catherine shot Stephen, the police interviewed his friends to gather information about their relationship. According to Stephen's friends, the relationship between Mary Catherine and Stephen was toxic and marked by constant arguing. They reported that Mary Catherine and Stephen frequently had heated confrontations. Stephen's friends reported that Mary Catherine was extremely possessive and verbally abusive towards him. They claimed she showed signs of mental instability, which made their relationship increasingly tense. Whenever Stephen tried to take some space and leave their apartment, Mary Catherine would bombard him with texts and calls, forcing him to block her. One friend revealed that Stephen had confided in him about Mary Catherine pulling a gun on him at least 3 times in the past. Stephen didn't report incidents to the police because he worried Mary Catherine would get in trouble. His primary concern was her well-being, even when his own safety was at risk. When his friends found out that Mary Catherine accidentally shot Stephen, they struggled to believe it since she knew how to handle a firearm. 3 months before the shooting, Stephen told a friend that Mary Catherine was behaving erratically, screaming outside, and trying to shoot both him and herself. A month later, Stephen confided in another friend that Mary Catherine had pointed a gun at him before, but the most recent incident made him genuinely fear she would follow through. By July 2018, Stephen was exhausted with Mary Catherine's behavior and considered leaving her after 7 years together. He planned to secretly move to a new town while she was out due to fearing her reaction if she knew. Police later discovered text messages from July 30, 2018, 2 days before Mary Catherine fatally shot Stephen. The first text message sent by Stephen to Mary Catherine on July 30 read, "Good morning, beautiful. Don't forget." Mary Catherine responded with, "Have a great day." Stephen then replied, "You too. Love you." However, the police found that the following night, July 31st, Stephen spent the evening at a friend's house and did not return Mary Catherine's texts or calls because they was fighting. On the night of the shooting, August 1st, Mary Catherine was at home preparing dinner, but Stephen was not there. She reached out to Stephen's mother. She informed her that Stephen was with his friend. Angry at Stephen, Mary Catherine started driving to his friend's house. As she drove, she spotted Stephen sitting in the passenger seat of his friend's truck. Mary Catherine pulled alongside Stephen's friend and started yelling at Stephen. Stephen tried to calm Mary Catherine down, assuring her that he was on his way home. Mary Catherine allegedly pointed a gun at Stephen multiple times, according to his friends. However, Mary strongly denied these claims, stating she never pulled a gun on him. On another hand, Mary Catherine did admit to threatening to take her own life with a gun on several occasions. Stephen's mother believed that he stayed with Mary Catherine due to her repeated threats of self-harm, which made Stephen fear for Mary's life if he left. On the night of the incident, Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen became violent, throwing the dinner she prepared in her face. She stated that she picked up the gun for self-defense, trying to scare Stephen away and make him leave the apartment. According to her, Stephen lunged at her, causing her to back away, and the next thing she knew, he was bleeding from the chest. At the time of Stephen's shooting, Mary Catherine did not tell the police about Stephen's history of violence towards her because she was embarrassed. According to Mary Catherine, Stephen had been violent and controlling in the past, even kicking her out of bed with enough force to make her hit her head on the door frame. However, Stephen's friends had a different perspective on the relationship. They claimed to have witnessed Mary Catherine hitting Stephen, including one instance where she slapped him hard in the face. On the other hand, Mary Catherine's sister had a different view of their relationship. She reported seeing bruises on Mary Catherine's arm 2 weeks before Stephen was shot. When she asked Mary Catherine about the bruises, Mary Catherine said that Stephen had grabbed her. After investigating Stephen's death, the police concluded that it was a murder. As a result, Mary Catherine was charged with murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. The state offered Mary Catherine a plea deal and receive a life sentence with the possibility of parole. However, she rejected the offer and chose to went to trial, pleading not guilty and arguing that she shot Stephen in self-defense. The trial began on June 17, 2019, nearly a year after Stephen's death. Mary Catherine's attorneys claimed that she acted in self-defense, citing her genuine fear of Stephen due to his violent and abusive history. They presented evidence of Stephen's controlling, manipulative, and violent behavior to support their case. During the trial, Mary Catherine testified in her own defense, sharing emotional accounts of the constant abuse she suffered at the hands of Stephen. She described a pervasive pattern of physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual abuse, stating that Stephen would frequently hit her, humiliate her, and subject her. Mary Catherine reported that Stephen subjected her to various forms of abuse. She shared instances where he physically and verbally abused her. The abuse had a profound impact on her physical and emotional well-being, leaving her feeling trapped and fearful for her life. During the trial, Mary Catherine's defense presented a text message from Stephen, stating that she would be punished when he returned home. When questioned about the meaning of this message, Mary Catherine explained that Stephen would physically abuse her and demand that she be a better girlfriend. The defense also presented another text message, in which Stephen warned Mary Catherine not to hit him, threatening to retaliate with twice the force. In her testimony, Mary Catherine described a red room where Stephen and Mary Catherine engaged in aggressive and sometimes violent intimacy, likening it to a concept from the popular book series 50 Shades of Grey. Mary's defense attorneys presented a text message from Stephen, which stated, "I miss you too much, I'm coming home, and you're about to get it bad, you're going to the red room." Mary Catherine also testified that Stephen sexually assaulted her on 2 occasions, one of which occurred after they returned from a vacation to Walt Disney World. Mary Catherine reported that their intercourse had become increasingly aggressive, and she expressed her discomfort to Stephen, asking him to stop. However, instead of heeding her pleas, Stephen allegedly intensified his efforts. He claimed that she had received various gifts at Disney World and now owed him what was rightfully his. According to Mary Catherine, Stephen told her that she had to give him what he wanted and what he deserved. The defense presented additional evidence in the form of text messages from Stephen to support Mary Catherine's claims of abuse. These messages were vulgar, threatening, and demonstrated a pattern of verbal assaults directed towards Mary Catherine. The defense had over 60 pages of text messages from Stephen that showcased his abusive behavior. One particular image sent while Stephen was out with a group of friends was particularly disturbing. In the image, Stephen was holding a large dead fish aloft with the caption, "This is you." Another message from Stephen to Mary Catherine, after she cheated on him, read that he would wreck her for her wrecking him. The defense also alleged that Stephen struggled with addiction to drugs and alcohol, which led to violent outbursts. During the conversation about the night Mary Catherine shot Stephen, she claimed that she ended their relationship, not Stephen. According to Mary Catherine, Stephen did not take the breakup and acted like he was going to attack her. Fearing for her safety, she grabbed a gun in self-defense. Mary Catherine stated that the last words she exchanged with Stephen before shooting him were, "Get out of my house." However, Stephen's friends and family disagreed with Mary Catherine's portrayal of him as violent, abusive, and dangerous. They described him as laid-back, friendly, and caring. His mother stated she was unaware of Stephen sending Mary Catherine disturbing text messages or threatening violence. While she did not condone such behavior, she believed Stephen only acted out of anger. During cross-examination, the state questioned Mary Catherine about never reporting the alleged abuse by Stephen. The state also pointed out that hours before the shooting, Mary Catherine had been searching for violent and sexually explicit images online while babysitting. Mary Catherine claimed she was looking at those sites to get ideas to make Stephen happy and convince him to stay with her. The state noted that Mary Catherine had altered her story about the night of the shooting at least 10 times since her initial interview a year prior to the trial. A crucial piece of evidence presented in court to support the prosecution's theory that Mary Catherine intentionally shot Stephen was a text message he sent her. The message stated that she had pointed a gun at him multiple times before, and the last incident had scared him. Additionally, Stephen's friends testified in court, sharing their accounts of witnessing Mary Catherine's abuse towards him. Their testimonies corroborated the prosecution's argument that Mary Catherine had a history of violence against Stephen, contradicting her claims that he was the abuser. After deliberating for 4 hours, the jury delivered a verdict of not guilty on the charges of malice murder, felony murder, assault, and possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony. As a result, Mary Catherine was released from prison. The verdict shocked Stephen's loved ones, who were stunned by the decision. In a later admission, members of the jury revealed that they believed Mary Catherine had intentionally shot and killed Stephen. However, they acknowledged that there was insufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt why she had shot him. This lack of evidence made it challenging to determine whether the shooting was murder or justified as self-defense. The jury was also unable to reach a consensus on the validity of all the accusations against both Stephen and Mary Catherine. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ecatrina Bauman. Ecatrina Bulgova was born on May 13, 1989 in Leningrad, a city that would later be renamed St. Petersburg. In 2009, Ecatrina, then 20 years old, traveled to Turkey with her family for a vacation. That's where she met Walter Bauman, a German citizen who was 13 years older than her. Walter had received his education in Germany and had a good income, but his personal life was lacking. He was searching for the perfect woman, but he didn't quite fit the criteria of a perfect man. He still lived with his parents, didn't take care of his appearance, and had a sloppy style. He often met women online, and many of them were Russian. Ecatrina and Walter got married in a luxurious ceremony. After the wedding, they moved into Walter's parents' home, which proved to be a challenging experience for Ecatrina. Living with Walter's parents was not easy, and this marked the beginning of problems for Ecatrina after her move to Germany. The fairy tale romance was starting to lose its magic. Walter's mother, Ludmila, was a strong-willed woman who had achieved great success as an immigrant in Germany. However, she struggled to accept that her son Walter was now a grown man in his 30s and no longer needed her guidance. Ecatrina, Walter's wife, tried her best to please Ludmila, but Ludmila continued to interfere in their marriage and criticize Ecatrina. In 2017, Ecatrina became pregnant, and Walter decided to use some of his savings to buy a house, hoping that this new chapter would bring positive change to their relationship. Unfortunately, the move did not have the desired effect, as Ludmila continued to visit frequently and insert herself into their lives. The birth of their daughter brought even more tension to the relationship between Walter and Ecatrina. Walter became increasingly strict and controlling, speaking down to Ecatrina and restricting her freedom. He prohibited her from learning to drive a car and did not allow her to speak with their daughter in German. Ecatrina was confused and unsure of what was causing these changes in Walter's behavior. Walter and Ecatrina's relationship had become strained, and he would physically harm her, including beating her. Authorities were alerted to the domestic violence issue in late 2019, but the case was dismissed when they claimed they had reconciled. Ecatrina expressed concerns about Walter's behavior, citing his lack of interest in her, excessive work habits, and resulting burnout. Feeling constantly stressed and fearful, Ecatrina turned to a support center for domestic violence victims for the first time in fall 2020. When Ecatrina and their daughter left, Walter made an effort to reconcile with them, promising to change and acknowledging his past wrongdoing. He also told Ecatrina that he couldn't live without her and their daughter. Although Ecatrina forgave him and returned home with their daughter, their arguments persisted. When Walter recognized he had wronged Ecatrina, he would try to make amends with gifts or family trips. While this may have indicated a change in attitude towards Ecatrina, Walter's behavior towards their daughter was marked by total control. Walter was a calculated individual who dramatized situations and manipulated others to get what he wanted. He was extremely frugal and prioritized accumulating wealth. Those who knew him well described him as anxious and impatient. After Ecatrina became a mother, she made several trips to Russia with her husband Walter, who was concerned that she would return to Russia and keep him from seeing their daughter. As Ecatrina experienced more and more abuse from Walter, she began to consider divorce. Ecatrina's reason for staying with Walter was to protect her daughter, but she couldn't take her daughter back to Russia because Walter had to give his consent, which he refused to do. In August 2021, Ecatrina took her daughter to a women's crisis center, telling the administration that Walter had threatened to take her life. Social services considered placing a 5-year-old girl in an orphanage, a situation the Youth Affairs Department psychologist deemed severe. Although Ecatrina initially agreed to let the child enter foster care, her husband Walter and his mother objected, forcing the parents to care for their daughter temporarily. The family reunited weeks later, but Walter and Ecatrina started divorce proceedings and began living separately. Ecatrina's desire to return to Russia intensified, but Walter consented only if their daughter remained with him in Germany. At the start of 2022, Ecatrina traveled to St. Petersburg alone, meeting a Russian pilot from Omsk she had met online while there. After returning to Germany in mid-January 2022, Ecatrina continued to communicate with the pilot daily. Ecatrina, a 32-year-old woman, stopped contacting her family and her new lover on February 4, 2022, after returning to Germany. This was a surprise to her family, as she had been exchanging love messages with her new lover just a few weeks earlier. According to her husband Walter, Ecatrina left behind most of her belongings, including her phone, keys, clothes, and her 5-year-old daughter. She took only an empty suitcase and 13,000 euros from her husband's stash. This is the information Walter shared with the police on February 6, 2022, after Ecatrina's parents reached out to them to request a check because they couldn't reach Ecatrina for 2 days. Ecatrina's mother, Svetlana, reported that she learned about her daughter's disappearance in a strange way. She couldn't reach Ecatrina on the phone for a few days, and when she spoke with Walter, he claimed that he hadn't seen her since February 5th and that she wasn't responding because she didn't have enough money on her phone balance. The police waited 4 days before searching the Walter family's house where Ecatrina was last seen. By then, Walter had completed his renovations, which included painting the guest room floor and replacing a couch. He had also purchased a large quantity of cleaning supplies from a local store. The police investigation at the Baumann house found that the surveillance footage had mysteriously disappeared. A detection dog was brought in to search the house and garage, but although it seemed agitated, it didn't indicate finding anything specific. Initial tests found no evidence in the house or garage, but a knife and electric shocker were seized from the car. What raised suspicions was Walter's unusual behavior. He showed no concern for his missing wife, but expressed interest in gaining sole guardianship of their 5-year-old daughter. On March 1, 2022, 25 days after her disappearance, the horrific discovery of a suitcase containing human remains that washed up along the River Weser. The person who discovered the suitcase was horrified to find that it contained the fragments of a woman's body, packed in garbage bags. Unfortunately, not all of her body parts were present in the suitcase, as some were still missing. To make matters worse, the fragments were identified as those of 32-year-old Ecatrina Baumann. Coincidentally, the suitcase was found near the lighthouse where Ecatrina had previously gotten married. During a thorough search of the Walter family home, investigators found a variety of suspicious items, including a bottle of sedatives that matched the substance found in Ecatrina's blood. Additional discoveries included disposable gloves, foil, adhesive tapes, garbage bags, and cleaning products, as well as canisters containing acetic acid, solvents, and bleach. Notably, the police found a pink scarf matching the one Ecatrina wore in her last selfie near her body. They also discovered a set of suitcase keys and other incriminating items in the garage and shed. Furthermore, the investigation revealed that most of Ecatrina's personal belongings were absent, with her clothes thrown away and her wedding photo hidden behind the piano. One key piece of evidence turned up at the workplace of Ludmila Baumann, Walter's mother. The white jacket Ecatrina wore in her last selfie was found in a trash container. Ecatrina's phone was last connected to the network at 7:41 p.m. Later that evening, she made a video call to her new lover from her computer at 8:25 p.m., saying she would call him again after putting her child to bed. However, she never made that call, and her phone remained silent for the rest of the evening. 2 hours after her video call, her lover sent her a goodnight message, which she never read. A forensic examination revealed that Ecatrina died 2 hours after dinner, based on the analysis of her stomach contents. The examination also found strong sedatives and alcohol in her blood, and her hyoid bone was broken, indicating that she was strangled. The examination further showed that her body was mutilated using very sharp tools. The next morning, Walter briefly opened his car door at 7:22 a.m., and the car was driven off at 10:20 a.m., returning at 4:49 p.m. 3 days later, Walter called Ecatrina's phone, likely to create the illusion that she had run away. He also sent her messages asking where she was in an attempt to maintain this illusion. Walter and his mother had a habit of chatting intensely through WhatsApp daily, but after February 4th, they suddenly stopped communicating, which was unusual for them. In the middle of February, Walter took his car to auto service and asked an employee to thoroughly clean the interior from top to bottom. This incident was later cited as evidence in a trial that began on August 26, 2022. The prosecutor argued that Walter had planned and executed the murder of his wife, Ecatrina, by slipping sedatives into her drink and then strangling her while she was asleep. Walter's motive was to avoid losing guardianship and potential financial losses in the event of a divorce. He had taken steps to prepare for Ecatrina's body disposal. Police found blood in the garage. Traces of her blood were also found on the carpet in the trunk of his car. Walter's phone and computer were seized by the police. He made several suspicious search queries, including how to avoid punishment for taking someone's life, dissolving human flesh with acid, and accessing other people's WhatsApp chats. He also searched for ways to die from sedatives and how to avoid conviction in Germany. Walter made around 500 search queries between December 2021 and February 2022, suggesting he planned the crime. On the day his wife disappeared, he searched for electric shocker twice. Forensic experts found evidence of electrocution on Ecatrina's body, suggesting Walter used a shocker to check if she was alive. In court, Walter wore his wedding ring and referred to himself as a widower. He remained silent, plugging his ears during testimonies, but showed emotion when his mother was called as a witness, crying and seeking her help with a prayer-like gesture. He had written to her asking for help, and she seemed willing to assist her son. Ludmila Baumann made a shocking statement, claiming she took Ecatrina's life, not her son. She visited her son's house at night to care for her granddaughter and found Ecatrina asleep on the couch. After a fight that started when Ecatrina hit her, Ludmila choked Ecatrina. She also admitted to performing certain actions with Ecatrina's body. It's possible Ludmila was motivated by her love for her son and took the blame for him. Despite her self-incrimination, Ludmila left the courtroom a free citizen as the jury and prosecutor's office didn't believe her statement, assuming she was trying to protect her son. Walter remained silent throughout the entire process, but during one of the final hearings, he read from his notes, which spanned 230 sheets of paper, covering his life, his experiences in Kazakhstan, and his love. His main message was that he loved Ecatrina and their daughter, but her emotional burnout and psychological problems led to frequent quarrels. Although his statement was extensive, he only briefly mentioned the night that changed everything. According to Walter, he was asleep when his mother took the life of his wife and dragged her into the garage. He blamed his mother for the crime, stating that she had betrayed him, used him, and sent him to prison. Addressing the judge, Walter said that his daughter had already lost her mother and should not lose her father as well. The most disturbing aspect of this story is not the gruesome details of the crime, but the fact that it all took place in front of the perpetrator's 5-year-old daughter. The Russian grandmother is currently barred from contacting her granddaughter who has been placed with a German foster family. The daughter was present at home with her father when the crime occurred, and as a result, she has developed a psychotraumatic condition. She often mutters to herself, gesturing to her head and arms, indicating that she witnessed the traumatic event. According to her mother, Svetlana, the child is now living in a facility for traumatized children under a new name to protect her from the truth about her family. Svetlana is fighting to gain guardianship of her granddaughter, but German authorities are not allowing her to even have phone contact with the child. On May 23, 2023, the verdict was announced in the case of Walter Baumann. Walter received a life sentence, but under German law, he will be eligible for parole after serving 15 years. Ecatrina's ashes were buried in her hometown of St. Petersburg. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Tess Ritchie. Tess Ritchie was the youngest of 5 sisters, born on November 30, 1994. She spent her childhood in North Bay before moving to Toronto at the age of 19. According to her sister Verena, Tess loved her life, dogs, and family. She worked as a waitress in Toronto, but her dream job was to become a flight attendant and travel the world. Although Tess struggled to find a job she liked, her family was always willing to support her financially. Some sources suggest that after failing to find work at an airline or hotel, she began learning Italian and searching for job opportunities in Italy online. Tess also created content on YouTube, with her last video uploaded on February 23, 2014, nearly 4 years before the events we will discuss. In that video, Tess shared her personal experiences and the challenges she faced. Tess explained that she searched everywhere for someone who would understand and relate to what she was experiencing, but she never found that. She said her boyfriend's physical abuse is never acceptable, no matter how minor it may seem. She stated that he hit her, and even downplaying it as just throwing a purse at her is embarrassing because it happened in his bedroom, and it's a sad reality. After recording this video, Tess mentioned that she faced more personal struggles. In 2017, she experienced a devastating breakup with her boyfriend Julian on November 23rd. The next day, she turned to her older sister Rachel, who was not only 8 years older, but also her closest confidant. Tess recounted that she spent most of November 24th at Rachel's house in Toronto, where they discussed her breakup, went shopping, and visited a dog park. Rachel had to encourage her to eat dinner because she had lost her appetite due to stress. Despite her emotional state, Tess made plans to meet an old school friend, Riley Samar, that night. Samar was from North Bay, and she had moved to Toronto in the summer of 2017. They hadn't seen each other in years, but now that they were both living in the same city, they had started talking again. Samar suggested they go to Cruise and Tango, a well-known drag bar in the Church in Wellesley area, that evening. Rachel's partner arranged for Ritchie to take an Uber to meet Samar downtown. Ritchie saw her sister Tess running out to catch the Uber, which was the last time she would ever see her alive. Ritchie arrived at the Cruise and Tango club around midnight, but Samar wasn't there yet. The club was packed, and Tess sent a text to her sister to let her know she had arrived safely. The next morning, Ritchie sent a text to her sister, not expecting a quick response since Tess had been out late the night before. However, by 6:30 p.m., Ritchie still hadn't heard back from Tess. She then discovered that none of her texts had been delivered to Tess's phone. When Ritchie tried calling, the calls went straight to voicemail. Their mother, Christine Hermiston, also attempted to contact Tess, but her phone was turned off. Christine got a notification that her daughter Tess had ordered an Uber at 4:02 a.m., but then the ride was canceled. This happened because Tess had used Christine's credit card to set up her Uber account, so Christine received updates on all of Tess's Uber rides. When Christine and her family couldn't reach Tess during the day and her phone stayed off, they started to worry because Tess always kept in touch with them. Rachel typically kept her phone with her at all times. On Saturday night around 9 p.m., she asked her partner to check on her sister's apartment in Scarborough while she reached out to her friends. Tess was still missing, and her family was growing increasingly worried. Rachel began calling hospitals and also contacted the police. By the following evening, the police had no updates for Tess's family. Multiple officers were assigned to search for Tess Ritchie, but no one had seen or heard from her in the past 2 days. On Monday, Tess's mother, Christine, and one of her sisters traveled from North Bay to Toronto to help with the search. They distributed flyers featuring Tess's picture, hoping someone might recognize her. The family did everything they could, but unfortunately, the police's investigation into Tess's disappearance was lacking. Meanwhile, Tess's friend Riley, who had gone to the bar with her that night, returned home safely. When asked about Tess's whereabouts, Riley mentioned that they had both been drinking heavily, which led to the bar's security asking them to leave. They left the bar shortly after 2 a.m. and headed to Wellesley Street to grab a bite to eat. On their way, they met a guy who decided to join them, but Riley couldn't remember his name. Once on Wellesley Street, they ordered hot dogs. Tess asked for a vegetarian hot dog, which led to a disagreement with the vendor. Tess thought she received a meat hot dog, and Riley noted that Tess accidentally sprayed mustard all over the vendor's cart. After that, Tess, Riley, and their new companion ran to Dundonald Street. There, they encountered a woman named Michelle on her porch and struck up a conversation that lasted about 20 minutes. Tess confided in Michelle about her recent breakup and how difficult it had been for her. Michelle offered her support, and they even exchanged phone numbers. Michelle observed that Ritchie seemed to be trying to enjoy himself, but when she looked into his eyes, she noticed a deep sadness. The breakup with Julian seemed to be affecting Riley heavily. Riley reassured her that things would improve and encouraged her to stay strong. At 4 a.m., Riley got a text from her boyfriend asking her to come home. She said goodbye to Tess and headed towards Yonge Street before going home. Tess felt let down that Riley had left so early. At 4:02 a.m., she ordered an Uber, suggesting that she decided to go home too after Riley left. The Uber driver arrived at 4:14 a.m., but Tess was not there. On Wednesday, November 29th, just a day before Tess's 23rd birthday, Christine began handing out flyers with her daughter's picture in the area where Tess was last seen. Since Riley had separated from Tess on Dundonald Street, Christine decided to investigate that area. She reached out to Anne Brazo, a nurse at St. Michael's Hospital, knowing their daughters had been friends since elementary school in North Bay. Together, they began searching for Ritchie as efforts intensified and social media campaigns aimed to find her. During this time, Brazo made a chilling discovery while looking into the bottom of an outdoor stairwell at a construction site located at 582 Church Street. She immediately recognized Ritchie's body lying on the concrete. "I was in complete shock, horror, disbelief. I couldn't understand what I was seeing," said Anne, fighting back tears. Feeling frightened, she noticed dust from a nearby gravel pile settled on Ritchie's body. Brazo let go of the staircase railing and stepped back down the gravel driveway toward Church Street. Meanwhile, Hermiston was further up the sidewalk, unaware that her daughter's body was so near. Brazo called out to her, "Christine, come back here. There's a girl in the stairwell. You need to come back." Hermiston turned and ran down the driveway, stopping suddenly at the stairwell. After a few moments, she began to scream, pleading with God for assistance. Tess's death presented a heartbreaking event for her entire family. They discovered her body only 300 yards from the bar where she had been before disappearing, and just 20 yards from the last place her friend Riley saw her. This situation raised many questions about the police's response, especially since her body had been found just a couple of blocks from the bar. After Anne and Christine located Tess's body, an anonymous police source shared new information with the media. It was reported that Tessa had advertised her intimate services online and had worked at a strip club. Tess's mother stated that the Toronto police did not adequately search for Richie because they assumed she was an escort. This assumption was horrifying to Hermiston, who expressed her anger at the media's portrayal. After Richie's body was found, police sources claimed she was involved in the sex trade, which Hermiston called a blatant lie. They spread this information to suggest she led a high-risk lifestyle, deflecting blame from themselves. Although Tess briefly worked as a waitress at a strip club, she quit less than 2 weeks after starting. The mention of intimate services was linked to a dating site account, not a profession. Despite the discovery of Richie's body, the circumstances of her death remained unclear. Initially, police did not suspect foul play, but the homicide unit took over when an autopsy indicated she had died from neck compression. Additionally, they discovered seminal fluid on her clothing and saliva on her bra. DNA tests revealed male DNA, prompting police to begin searching for a suspect. Based on Riley's testimony, detectives aimed to identify the man Tess had met that night, as he was the person she spent time with after Riley went home. The police examined CCTV footage to gather information about that night. The video shows Tess and Riley leaving the bar and heading towards a hot dog vendor. There were also cameras on the building near where Anne discovered the body. After reviewing the recordings, the police observed Tess and an unidentified man walking hand in hand up the gravel driveway. According to the police, the camera captured Tess and this unknown man at 4:14 a.m. A subsequent recording taken 46 minutes later showed the man leaving the location alone, with no further footage of Tess. This led the police to consider him the main suspect in the Tess Richie case. On December 10th, during a press conference, the Toronto police released images of him obtained from the surveillance footage. They hoped that someone would be able to identify him. The police discovered the identity of the man after seeing the published images. He called the police station himself and stated that he was the guy in the photo. The person who was with Tess that night was identified as 21-year-old Colin Schlatter. In the fall of 2017, Schlatter was 21 years old and living with his parents and younger brother in their home in North Toronto. He had completed a year of postgraduate studies to become a car mechanic and was working with his father in construction. Schlatter, along with his parents and one of his lawyers, visited the police station where he spoke briefly with detectives but chose not to testify. But finally, they provided the police with important evidence. While still at the police station, Schlatter discarded an empty water bottle in a trash can. The police took the bottle and sent it for forensic analysis. After some time, they found that the DNA on the bottle matched DNA samples taken from seminal fluid and saliva found on Tess Richie's body, indicating that they came from the same person. Police planned an undercover operation to observe Schlatter for several weeks, but the DNA results sped up their timeline. Schlatter was arrested at approximately 11 p.m. on February 4, 2018, after watching the Super Bowl with his family at a cinema. He was taken to the 13th Division and placed in a holding cell at 3:19 a.m. on February 5th. 2 other men were in holding cells next to him, both of whom were undercover police officers. Schlatter was unaware that he was about to provide them with a significant amount of evidence. The 3 men were in plain holding cells, each containing a combination toilet, sink, and bed. In the cell, Schlatter discussed his love for card games and claimed he had a knack for attracting women. He bragged about having slept with over 40 women, even though he was only 21. Schlatter did not encounter Tess and her friend Riley on the street. He saw them for the first time in the same bar where he was present. This recording was made just before security asked Tess and Riley to leave the bar. Schlatter also spoke to undercover officers about Tess. Initially, he claimed she was alive when he departed. However, he later suggested that something might have happened because alcohol had clouded his memory. He doubted his own capability. The police charged Ken Schlatter with the murder of Tess Richie, but he denied the accusation. In June 2018, police officers Alan McCullough and Michael Jones were charged with 2 counts of misconduct for neglect of duty under Ontario's Police Services Act. The report of hearing stated that they allegedly failed to thoroughly search the nearby property or immediate area, interview neighbors, and inform a supervisor. If they had followed protocol, Christine Hermiston stated, they would have found her. She was lying just around the corner. During the 2020 trial of Ken Schlatter, his defense argued that someone else could have approached the stairs where Tess was lying by climbing over the fence on the other side of the building, thus avoiding the cameras. The lawyers even named another suspect, but the police thoroughly investigated and interrogated this person, finding no evidence linking him to Tess's death. DNA evidence pointed to only one person, Ken Schlatter. Schlatter, a slight man who appeared soft-spoken in court, explained that he has a speech defect, causing him to slur his words and stutter sometimes. He claimed that Tess offered him a place to hide from prying eyes at 4:02 a.m., which explained the presence of his DNA on her belongings. Tess Ritchie had ordered an Uber, but when the driver arrived at the pickup point at 4:14 a.m., she wasn't there. Instead, Calvin Schlatter approached her again. They sat down on a bench at the corner of street. Schlatter stated that Tess seemed upset after their argument, so he went over to check on her. Schlatter claimed Tess asked him to sit and talk, but with no audio on security videos, it can't be confirmed. He said she was upset about her breakup, so he shared a similar experience to comfort her. Schlatter claimed that later, Tess asked if it was okay to kiss him. He said they stood up, hugged, and kissed each other. However, there is no footage of this kiss on the available CCTV footage. Schlatter claims that Tess Ritchie asked him to accompany her to the driveway at 582 Church Street and then down the outdoor stairwell. However, the prosecution questioned his motives, as an Uber driver was waiting for Tess at the time. It is unclear what Schlatter said to Tess to persuade her to walk with him into the darkness at 4 a.m. According to Schlatter, they kissed for a long time, and he ejaculated in his pants. He wanted to take things further, but Tess refused. Schlatter states that after this, he invited Tess to his house, but she declined and told him to leave. He claims that he left, and Tess was alive when he departed. There were only 2 people who knew the truth about the events of that night. Unfortunately, one of them had already passed away. During the trial, the prosecution presented 2 key witnesses, Riley, a friend of Tess, and Michelle Tepp, a woman who had spoken with Tess and Schlatter that night. Both Riley and Michelle identified Schlatter. In addition to talking to 2 undercover police officers, Schlatter is also alleged to have shared important details with a cellmate, known only as ES due to a publication ban, when they were both being held at a Toronto detention center for about 2 months in 2018. ES has a long history of criminal activity, including multiple break-ins and a domestic assault. The informant, who shared a cell with Calvin Schlatter, initially felt sympathetic towards Schlatter because he was a young man experiencing imprisonment for the first time. However, as time passed, his opinion of Schlatter changed. Schlatter would often cry himself to sleep, claiming he didn't want to serve his sentence and missing his mother. Despite this, Schlatter showed no regret when discussing the death of Tess Ritchie. According to him, Schlatter admitted to kissing Ritchie and losing control when she refused to go further, ultimately strangling her with a scarf. In court, Schlatter denied having these conversations with the informant, and his lawyer portrayed the informant as a deceitful liar. Nevertheless, physical evidence suggests that Ritchie was strangled, and only Schlatter's DNA was found on her clothing. In her final statement to the jury, defense attorney Lydia Riva presented her client, Schlatter, as a harmless and innocent young man. She acknowledged that it can be difficult to accept, but the criminal justice system is not infallible and can sometimes make mistakes. On March 23, 2020, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, and the judge sentenced Schlatter to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The trial was emotionally devastating for Richie's family and supporters, who were often left reeling and in tears in the courtroom. Tess's death has left the family feeling guilty and broken, struggling to look at each other. They're seeking $20 million in damages, including punitive damages, to ensure justice for their daughter. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Celeste Mano. Celeste Mano was born on November 30th, 1997 in northeastern Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. She was the youngest of two children to Eggy Diro and Tony Mano, with an older brother named Alessandro. Although her parents divorced when she and her brother were young, her father remained involved in their lives, providing financial support and staying in touch. During her school years, Celeste was outgoing, active, and popular. She participated in sports and dance, led the cheerleading team, and had ambitious plans for her future. Initially, she aimed to become a lawyer and enrolled at the University of Melbourne to study criminal and civil law. However, as she neared graduation, she found law unfulfilling and switched her focus to advertising and marketing. In 2018, she landed a job at a large e-commerce company that sold various products online. Celeste, a highly intelligent and talented individual, rapidly advanced in her career, going from a call center worker to a department head in under 2 years. Her exceptional abilities, initiative, and organizational skills earned her widespread admiration from colleagues. Besides her professional prowess, Celeste was also known for her stunning physical appearance, having been a participant in her university's beauty contest. With many admirers since her youth, Celeste was cautious in selecting partners. One such admirer was Lynette, a 16-year-older colleague who showed strong interest in her from the moment she joined the company. Notably, Lou was a reserved and unsociable person who lacked career ambitions, content with his long-held minor position. Celeste, a kind and smiling person, consistently turned down Louis's requests to go out with her, always doing so politely to avoid hurting his feelings. Despite this, Louis continued to try to get her attention through various means. To lighten the mood, Celeste would occasionally make jokes, but she remained firm in her decision to not pursue anything with him. Louis, however, misinterpreted her behavior as a challenge and believed that Celeste was simply playing hard to get, vowing to win her over no matter what. Louis's persistent attention was awkward, annoying, and refused to fade. Celeste maintained her composure, hoping that he would eventually lose interest or focus on someone else. However, as time went on, Louis became increasingly obsessed with Celeste, and his infatuation did not go unnoticed by those around them. One day, Celeste confided in a close friend and colleague that she would never consider a relationship with Louis, citing 3 reasons: his peculiar and unpredictable nature, his lack of ambition and life goals, and their significant age difference. Celeste's admirer, Louis, made the fatal mistake of neglecting his work duties in his fruitless attempts to win her attention and affection. As a result, his productivity plummeted, and he received 3 reprimands and warnings from senior management. Eventually, he was dismissed from his job in early autumn 2019. When Louis was fired, he was devastated and on the verge of tears as he packed up his belongings in the office. Celeste, on the other hand, felt relieved that the unwanted suitor would no longer be a nuisance, but she also felt guilty, thinking that her rejection had contributed to his downfall. Mano, the department manager, thanked Louis for his years of service, escorted him out of the building, and offered him words of encouragement and luck before parting ways. Louis misinterpreted Celeste's reaction to his sudden kiss as a sign that she had feelings for him, despite her clear discomfort. He convinced himself that she was hesitant to pursue an office romance due to her position as his boss, and that their social differences were the only obstacle to their happiness. Emboldened by this mistaken belief, Louis decided to take matters into his own hands. After being fired, he created a social media account, found Celeste's profile, and sent her a friend request. When she initially accepted, he began sending her multiple requests to meet up, which she first tried to politely decline before eventually blocking him. Celeste's former colleague sent her another friend request on social media, this time from a new profile. Despite her attempts to ignore him, he began commenting on her photos, complimenting her appearance and suggesting they would make a great couple. She tried to limit her profile settings to prevent this, but a week later, she was still harassed. During a family gathering, Celeste confided in her relatives about the unwelcome attention, sharing the strange incident that occurred on the day he was fired. Her family listened, but they didn't take it seriously, assuming the admirer would eventually lose interest and leave her alone. What they didn't know was that the harassment was about to escalate. Although Lou didn't have Celeste's personal phone number, she started receiving romantic messages from an unknown number. She knew exactly who was behind them. The unwanted admirer sent her romantic poems, admired her beauty, and continued to try to convince her to go out with him. Mano received repetitive calls from her stalker, and she decided to answer once to have a direct conversation with him. She explained that there was no possibility of a relationship between them and asked him to stop contacting her. However, the stalker ignored her words and instead complimented her voice, expressing his happiness that she had finally answered his call. After this incident, Mano tried to block his number, but the stalker continued to harass her by calling from different numbers. This pattern of harassment persisted for months, during which Mano attempted to ignore him by blocking his numbers and fake social media profiles and not responding to his messages. She tried to maintain her daily routine, but the stalker's messages continued, transitioning from romantic to bold and threatening in nature. Eventually, the stalker's messages evolved from requests to demands, as he insisted on meeting Mano and sharing his delusional fantasies about what he would do to her. Celeste's situation took a dark turn when she discovered that her stalker, Louis, had started following her from work to her home, learning her address. At first, she didn't realize that Louis was physically present in her life, not just sending messages. She would occasionally catch glimpses of him near her home, but convinced herself it was just her imagination and paranoia. It wasn't until she finally acknowledged the truth that Louis was indeed following her every move, driven by his obsessive behavior. Celeste then sought police protection, requesting a restraining order to keep the stalker away from her and her home. However, the police were uncooperative and dismissive of her concerns. According to them, Louis hadn't broken any laws since writing poems and sharing explicit fantasies and messages wasn't illegal. Without concrete evidence of Louis's stalking, the police brushed her off, telling her to leave the precinct and let them focus on catching real criminals. A restraining order was finally issued against Sacco, prohibiting him from contacting Celeste in any way. At first, he respected the order and disappeared from her life for a few weeks, giving Celeste a sense of freedom and relief. However, her peace was short-lived. Less than a month later, she started receiving messages from unknown numbers. Sacco was pleading and then demanding that she drop the restraining order, claiming it was interfering with their supposed romantic relationship. Celeste immediately reported these messages to the police, as Sacco was violating the restraining order. As a result, he was fined and warned that further violations would lead to harsher consequences, including possible jail time. After this incident, Sacco remained quiet for almost 2 months, leading Celeste to believe he had finally left her alone. During this time, Celeste met Chris Redale, a young man who shared her interests, values, and goals. They quickly formed a romantic connection. Celeste opened up to her new boyfriend, Chris, about the harassment she had suffered at the hands of a former admirer. Although it had been over a month since she last heard from him, she still felt anxious about the situation. Chris was supportive and reassuring, doing everything he could to make her feel safe and cared for. As their relationship progressed, Celeste felt comfortable enough to introduce Chris to her family at a dinner gathering in early November. Her family welcomed him with open arms, and her mother even joked that Celeste was now in good hands. The next few weeks were peaceful, with no signs of the former admirer. Celeste was happy and carefree, spending all her free time with Chris. On November 15, 2020, the couple went on a date to a cafe where they enjoyed each other's company and decided to capture the moment by taking a selfie. The photo of the couple turned out to be very romantic, showing them sitting together, embracing and smiling happily. Celeste was so fond of this picture that she decided to use it as her social media profile picture, also wanting to share the news of her new relationship and indicate that things were getting serious. Chris also shared the photo on his page, accompanied by a heartfelt caption expressing his love for Celeste and his desire to keep her happy. However, this outing would be the couple's last. Tragedy struck on the evening of their last date. After Chris dropped Celeste off at her home, they said their goodbyes and planned to meet again the next day. Celeste spent about an hour chatting with her mother in the kitchen about her boyfriend before going to bed, as she had to wake up early for work the next morning. But on November 16, 2020, around 4 a.m., disaster struck when Eggy was awakened by the sound of breaking glass. Eggy was awoken by suspicious noises, followed by banging, screams, and commotion. At first, she thought the sounds were coming from outside, but soon realized they were inside her house. Panicked, she rushed to her daughter Celeste's room, throwing on her robe and jumping out of bed. When she opened the door, she saw someone fleeing the room through the broken window. She turned on the light to find her daughter lying in a pool of blood, covered in cuts and tiny shards of glass. Celeste struggled to breathe, her eyes wide open and staring upward. Eggy called emergency services and tried to stop the bleeding, but it was too late. By the time the police and doctors arrived, Celeste had passed away. The autopsy revealed over 20 stab wounds on her body, with a fatal blow to her heart. The police investigation concluded that the attack took less than 3 minutes, from the assailant breaking in through the window to the moment Eggy entered the room. Celeste was attacked with a large butcher's knife, and her attempts to defend herself left her arms with multiple cuts. When investigators asked her mother, Eggy, if Celeste had any enemies, she mentioned Louis Sacco, who had been stalking and harassing Celeste for over a year with frequent calls and threatening messages. Other family members, friends, and colleagues confirmed this information. At the crime scene, the attacker left behind a large number of bloody fingerprints and DNA evidence on a fence he jumped over while fleeing, which also indicated that he had injured his hand. It was crucial to detain and question Louis immediately as the prime suspect and to verify all the evidence and witness statements. Louis was arrested on the same day, but he initially denied any involvement, claiming that he loved Celeste and would never harm her. However, forensic results soon confirmed that the bloody fingerprints found in Celeste's room and on the fence belonged to Louis. Additionally, law enforcement discovered that Louis had violated a restraining order, preventing him from approaching Celeste. Furthermore, surveillance footage showed that Louis had purchased a hammer and a large knife at a local hardware store on the evening before the attack. Louis committed a horrific crime. He used a hammer to break into a woman's house through her window and then fatally attacked her with a knife. Louis bought a knife and a hammer and then waited until nighttime to carry out his attack on Celeste's home. His actions seemed deliberate and premeditated, yet his behavior was also erratic, raising questions about his mental health. Notably, the 39-year-old man had never been married, still lived with his parents, had few friends, and struggled to hold down a job. Louis was a nervous and introverted individual who struggled with social interactions. He also had a biological brother who was currently serving a long prison sentence for a crime. As a result, the court ordered a forensic psychiatric evaluation for Louis. His attorney argued that instead of imprisonment, Louis needed specialized treatment to address his mental health issues, which required professional attention. The victim's family was outraged by the argument that the criminal, Louis, might avoid punishment by claiming insanity. However, psychiatric experts concluded that although Lewis suffered from mental disorders, he was fully aware of his actions during the crime and had even planned it in advance. As a result, Lewis was forced to stand trial, where he continued to claim that he was mentally ill and not responsible for his actions. Despite his efforts, the jury found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to 36 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The case highlighted the need for reform in Victoria's criminal laws, particularly regarding online stalking. Celeste, the victim, had reported Lewis to the police in 2020, but her complaint was not taken seriously because the law did not consider online harassment a crime. Her mother, Eggy, worked tirelessly to develop Celeste's law, which would have introduced criminal liability for stalking on social networks. Although Eggy presented over 40 recommendations to the Legislative Commission, almost all were rejected. Research showed that most online stalkers do not escalate their behavior, and the resulting amendments only restricted access to confidential social media information and allowed restraining orders in severe cases. Unfortunately, stalkers still faced no criminal liability, and Celeste's law was never enacted.